Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Legendary Anbu Council bashing. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by TwiceMarked and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. The Return. Slowly, Naruto stumbled back down the path back to Konoha, both mentally and physically exhausted. He was only just able to make 5 more steps before he collapsed, boneless, to the ground. The battle had been long and the fighting fierce, yet in the end, he had prevailed. Pain was defeated and Konoha had been saved. The village may have been destroyed, but thanks to Nagato, its people lived once more, and inside them, the will of fire still burned strongly. His precious people had survived. At least, that's what Katsuya had said. But he had to know. He had to find out whether or not their survival was not just a dream for himself. Before going any further, Naruto dragged his weary body up to a sitting position and drew deeply on the nature energy surrounding him, once more entering sage mode, not for battle this time, but for an entirely different reason. "They're alive," he whispered, as tears began to stream down his face. "Sakura-chan, Kakashi-sensei, Shizen, Hinata-chan, I can feel them all. They're all right." He sighed in relief, finally reassured, before quickly releasing sage mode. He had used far too much chakra to keep a hold of it. Sage mode was extremely dangerous to try and use when a person was so close to chakra exhaustion. Without his usual almost inhuman amounts of chakra, the nature energy would quickly overwhelm his own, resulting in him morphing into a frog, before turning to stone. It was a stupid, dangerous, reckless thing to do. But Naruto had to know for himself. He had to know that those precious to him were safe. Turning, he addressed the one who was moving stealthily towards him. "You're late, Kakashi-sensei," he said with a grin. Kakashi just smiled at him. "Well, you know those little old ladies." There was only a short distance left to go before they reached the village. Despite that, Kakashi was carrying his exhausted student back to the village on his back. Student Kakashi thought, shaking his head, musing about all the progress that his sleeping student had made, from dead last, to great shinobi, from the hated outcast, to village savior. "Truly, Naruto, you are your father's son," he whispered, smiling underneath his mask. "Thank you," Naruto said softly. Kakashi started. "You know who he is?" Kakashi asked. Naruto nodded. Flashback. Naruto had felt such despair. All his work, all his training, and he had still not been strong enough. Hinata-chan, Hinata was dead, and it was his fault, all his fault. No, it was not his fault. It was Pain's fault. Pain had done this, just as he had taken Jiraiya from him. No more. He had always been ready to die for those precious to him, ever since he had met Haku. Now, for the first and last time, he would heed the fox's words. He would unleash the Kyuubi no Kitsune and Pain would die. "That's it, boy, give in to your anger, your grief. Take this seal off and I will give you the power to kill the one who has taken away those precious to you." Slowly, Naruto slid his hand underneath the seal, readying himself to rip it off in one moment, before a hand stopped his and pulled him away from the great gates. "The seal is set so that if 8 tails are released, I'll appear within your consciousness. I didn't want that to happen. I never wanted to see you again, Kyuubi. But I looked forward to seeing how my son had grown, so I guess you could call it even." Turning around, Naruto faced the man who claimed him as his own, his father, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto smiled, remembering all that his father had told him, the message, the warning, but most of all, the sound of his father's voice, the glint in his sapphire eyes so like his own, and the best thing of all, the love that ran so deep within his father's voice when he spoke about how he believed in him. Then, they came out of the trees, to behold a sight that, although he had dreamed about it for such a long time, Naruto had never truly thought he would see. The villagers, all of the villagers were there, gathered together in a huge crowd, a crowd that was waiting for the return of their hero. Him. Cheering him on. They were there for him. They were there for Uzumaki Naruto. Kakashi smiled, remembering back to the days when he had first taken on his genin team, secure in the belief that they would most likely fail the next day. At the time, he had not believed that Naruto would ever accomplish his dream. Now, it was being fulfilled before his very eyes. Flashback. "My dream is to be greater than the Hokage. I'll make everyone in the village acknowledge my existence." "Naruto," he said. "You did good." Tears in his eyes, Naruto looked around, searching for the faces of those closest, unable to pick out their voices in the roar of the crowd surrounding him. His eyes quickly picked out Sakura, her bright pink hair making her stand out in the crowd. With a smile on her face, his teammate approached until within arm's reach. The people around them quieted down, to such an extent that Naruto could hear her whispered words. "Naruto," she said softly. "Hi, Sakura-chan," he said, staring at the one who he had had such a crush on for longer than he cared to remember. "Baka! she shouted, walloping him on the head. The crowd around them gasped, several of them almost bug-eyed from astonishment. Then, she pulled him into an embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, the tears slowly leaking from her eyes. As she stepped away, the crowd rushed in, hoisting him onto their shoulders and tossing him into the air. He began to laugh, a true laugh and deep. Iruka, Naruto's first sensei, looked on in pride, going over nostalgic memories of this boy, no, this man, who had become like a brother to him, like a son. Naruto's grin grew ever wider as he caught sight of his friends, the remainder of the Konoha 11. There was Lee, standing next to his sensei Might Guy, in those garish green tights, both of them standing in the nice guy pose. Down back into the crowd he went as gravity once more took hold of him, and he fell back into the crowd. Next time he was thrown into the air, he spotted Lee and Guy in an exuberant, youthful, man-hug. Naruto quickly looked away before the unbreakable sunset genjutsu came into effect. Standing next to them were the only ones able to ignore their teammates' antics, Niji and Tenten. Niji wore a small, confident smile of acceptance, but there was a worried look within his pale eyes. Tenten stood almost suspiciously close to Niji, her face set in a look of pride, with her hand resting almost comfortingly on the crook of Niji's elbow. Once more, Naruto was thrown into the air, his eyes searching for someone in particular. Team Inoshikacho were the next ones spotted, Shikamaru leaning on his best friend's arm, his leg obviously broken. The first Chunin nodded his head significantly at Naruto, signaling his respect. Anything else would have probably been too troublesome. Choji smiled crookedly, eyes closed. Ino also wore a small smile, her eyes showing a bit of disbelief. Naruto was so happy to see them. But they were not who he was looking for. Shikaku, Shikamaru's father, noticed his wandering eyes. It didn't take him long to figure out what he was looking for. The genius never made a move as one of the anbu, all of whom had proved so ineffective against pain, landed at a spot free from the press of the crowd right next to him. "What is it?" he asked. "Emergency meeting. You're to report to the council room immediately." "What council room?" Shikaku asked wryly, waving his hand, indicating the destruction surrounding them. "I'll lead you to it." Naruto was getting worried. He had been tossed up 8 times now, and he had still seen no sight of the one he was looking for. Finally, on toss number 9, he spotted Kiba, which meant that the one standing next to him, all bundled up in the hoodie, had to be Shino. Naruto still had difficulty with spotting Shino when he had all those clothes hiding almost all of his skin. Kiba was also smiling, a wide smile that showed off his elongated canines. Naruto couldn't for the life of him tell what expression Shino had on his face. But he could see that not all was what it seemed, something was wrong. Tension was written in every line of their bodies. Kiba, although smiling, was distracted. There was something forced about their appearance, as if they did not really want to be there. Naruto's heart sank. He knew what was wrong. "Stop," he whispered. The crowd did not heed him. "Please stop," Naruto said. Some of them heard his words now, but, believing him to being modest, they just grew more enthusiastic in their praise. "Stop!" Naruto roared. Surprised, Naruto was dropped to the floor, landing with a thud onto his rear. Quickly he sprang to his feet, ignoring the small pain. "Where is she?" he asked the now silent crowd. Those closest to him could not meet his gaze. "I said, where is she?" Sakura bit her lip. "Naruto," she said, biting her lip. "Where is Hinata Hyuga?" Chapter 2. A promise made and broken. It was Kiba and Shino that took him to Hinata's bedside. As Naruto entered the tent, Kurenai looked up from where she was sitting, right next to the Hyuga heir. Hinata's eyes were closed, sweat beaded her forehead, and her breathing was heavy and labored. Kurenai's eyes were now completely red, both the pupil and the white, evidence of her weeping. She smiled at Naruto, her eyes watery. Naruto immediately crossed the room to her side, seating himself next to Kurenai, as close as he could be to Hinata. "How is she?" Naruto asked. Things were not looking good. Naruto cursed himself for a dozen different kinds of fools for not realizing that this would have happened earlier. Nagato's jutsu was designed to raise the dead. So, since Hinata had not been dead when the jutsu came into effect, she had remained in her mortally injured state, since she was still alive, if barely. But the way that things were going, that could soon change. Despite Tsunade's best efforts and Katsuya's help, there were still so many wounded men and women and not nearly enough medic nin to treat them all. Almost none of the medic nin had actually died, since they had stayed as far away from the battlefield as possible, in order to be able to treat the wounded. Reaching out, he gently touched her forehead as he spoke. "Don't worry, Hinata, I'm here. I'm here for you and here I'll stay." At his touch and words, Hinata drew in a great, shuddering breath, after which her breathing seemed to get easier. Naruto removed his hand from her, and she moaned almost painfully. He replaced his hand. Hinata was running a fever. This time, he was sure of it. Why is she not being treated? Where are the medic needs? Naruto said, his voice soft so as not to wake her. Kurenai shook her head. They are completely swamped. Almost 90% of medic nin are suffering from chakra exhaustion. Where's Bachan? Naruto said angrily. In a coma, Kiba answered. She used far too much chakra in the battle, through Katsuya. She went above and beyond anything that has been seen of the Kages of this day. By rights, she should be dead. She would be if I hadn't been able to forcibly insert some chakra back into her chakra coils. A person stepped inside the tent. Shizen-san, Naruto said with a sigh of relief. Hurriedly, Shizen entered the room, Sakura trailing close behind. Help her please, Kurenai begged. No need to ask. Shizen quickly moved into the room. Sakura gave her the situation. Hinata-chan was stabbed by one of Pain's chakra rods, which punctured a lung and grazed her heart. I was able to repair the damage done to her heart, but that's not the worst part. What do you mean? Naruto asked, his breath tightening in his throat. What happened to you when Pain pinned you to the ground with those rods? Sakura asked. I couldn't move. He used the chakra receivers to send his own chakra into me, paralyzing me. Sakura nodded grimly. I thought as much. Remember Naruto, Pain wanted you alive. He wanted Hinata dead. Do you really think that that was the only type of chakra he could send into a person through those things? Everyone in the room stiffened. Your words lead me to the conclusion that Pain used a harmful chakra to do further damage to Hinata's system when he first wounded her, Shino said, his words logical, but his voice raw. Sakura nodded, sadly. Yes and no at the same time. The chakra did as you suggested, Shino, but it is still there. Nagato injected his chakra into Hinata. It's now running through her system, flowing through her own chakra coils and slowly eating away at whatever it comes into contact with. If she had more chakra within her at the time, then she may have been able to overwhelm it, but it's acting to prevent her own chakra production, and it does the damage at the same time. At the rate that she is going, Hinata will be dead in 4 days. That's not going to happen, Naruto's voice was filled with an unshakable certainty. Shizen-san, can you save her? I'll do my best, Naruto. No. You won't. The cold, unfeeling voice came from the tent flap, emotionless and cruel, it nevertheless was tinged with the unmistakable air of command. Danzo, Shizen hissed. What do you mean I won't? The crippled, bandaged man stepped into the light, revealing him to be wearing a very familiar set of robes. Simple. Konoha has suffered a mighty blow, the village has been destroyed. Our enemies will soon be aware of this fact. Our defenses are wiped out, and the terrain is different, which means we no longer have the home field advantage. And Tsunade-sama is out of action. How long before another village hears of this and decides that now is the perfect time to strike? The only thing we have as a deterrent for battle is the number of shinobi that we have ready to fight. What does this have to do with you forbidding our teammate medical care? Kiba asked loudly. Standing beside him, Akamaru growled. Danzo looked at him, contempt visible in his single eye. Numbers. Shizen has enough chakra to heal over a dozen ninja to perfect health. If she attempts to heal the Hyuga, then she will not be able to heal another. This does not benefit the village. Make no mistake about it, this is an order. Any other action will be taken treason. Naruto wanted to howl, to rage, to rip the man in front of apart. And yet, somehow, there was something stopping him, something that seemed to be influencing him. The same thing that was influencing every person in the room to do exactly as Danzo wanted. Hi, Hokage-sama, Shizen spat the reply out, as if she were trying to rid the taste of ashes that came with the words. Danzo nodded his head, satisfied. Teammate, what's left of you? Shino and Kiba tensed at his words. You are to undertake border control. Anyone entering our borders is to be treated as a threat and eliminated. This village and its surrounding area is in lockdown. Naruto-san will accompany you to provide the power needed to take out any threats that you face. Naruto felt the suggestion deep within him to do what the Hokage had ordered. But to do that would mean to leave Hinata, and that was something that he could not do. He had promised. No, I won't. Danzo and his 2 guards turned to face Naruto, who was still staring at Hinata. Did you just deny the Hokage's wishes? Asked one of the guards threateningly. It would be wise to change your answer, the other guard said. No. She was the only one that was there for me when I needed help. Now, I will stay with her when she needs mine. Believe it, Naruto's tone was final and brooked no argument. What do you mean? He means, cousin, that he disinclines to acquiesce your request. He refuses? By no means, of course not on your life, under no circumstances, never, no already. An angry buzzing could be heard from Shino as he spoke. The masked guard cocked his head at Shino. I do not understand your reaction, Shino. Hokage-sama's commands are perfectly logical. Shino inclined his head, conceding the point. That may be so, however at this point of time, logic is not the only thing that I am taking into account. Torian shook his head. You are allowing emotions to cloud your judgment, Shino. Let them go. Like hell, Kiba yelled. These emotions make you weak. Make you care. We are ninja, nothing more than tools, weapons serving our master. We are ninja, but we are also human. We are people with loved ones, with family and friends, people who are precious to us. It is those precious people who make our lives worth living, and by protecting those precious people, we can become truly strong. Both Fu and Torian snorted at this. Naruto ignored them. I said that I would stay with her, and I never go back on my word. Danzo cleared his throat and spoke once more. Nevertheless, the fact remains that you are a ninja, and as such, you will obey an order from the Hokage. Are we clear? Danzo stared intimidatingly at Naruto, whose blue eyes showed no tinge of fear. Perfectly, Naruto said. He slowly took of his height and tossed it at Danzo. I resign. I am no longer a ninja, and as such, you cannot order me to leave her side. Shock was evident in the stance of everyone present. Naruto, what about your dream? Sakura said. You'll never be Hokage if you are no longer a ninja. My dream was to become Hokage so that everyone would accept me. That happened today. Besides, there are more important things. I gave my word that I would stay with Hinata-chan. I never go back on my word. That is my nindo. Fool, Fu said. You can't have a nindo if you aren't a ninja. I've never been the type of person that you think is a ninja, but I will still live by my nindo, that is who I am. I will not allow it, Danzo stated. I refuse to accept your resignation. The only way that you can refuse a ninja their resignation is to give them a choice between continued service and execution, Shizen said. Danzo stiffened slightly, mentally cursing the fact that this mere boy had been able to resist the subtle influence of Shusoi's eye. Fine, Danzo said, tossing Naruto back his height. Due to your service to the Leaf Village and defeating Pain, you are given a period of leave in order to rest and recuperate. I will find another to accompany Team 8. But know this. Until further notice, you are to be confined to the village. If you leave, you will be treated as a missing nin. He turned to face the others. Meet at the front gate in 3 hours. After speaking, he swept out of the room. Forgive me, Hokage-sama. But why did you not just lock the insolent whelp in prison for a few weeks for refusing your orders? Fu asked. Danzo walked a little further, his cane thumping on the ground every second step. Popularity, Danzo spat the words out with contempt. Despite everything that I have done for this village, I am still relatively unknown. Naruto is the village hero at the moment. In truth, he has more support than I do at the moment. Would you believe that the young fool was actually nominated as Hokage? If I took any action against him now, almost the entire village would be up in protest. No, we watch, we wait, we bide our time. Besides, this is probably for the best. With more members of the Akatsuki still hunting him and that ridiculous ambition of his to go out and find Sasuke Uchiha, this is probably for the best. The Kyuubi will remain in the village, as a ninja, but only half a ninja. Naruto Uzumaki will one day wish to be a full ninja once more. When that day comes, I will seize the chance to make him the ultimate weapon. My ultimate weapon. Naruto stroked Hinata's hand, relieved beyond measure that he still had the comforting weight of his height on his forehead. I'm sorry, Naruto, Shizen said, placing her hand on Naruto's shoulder before leaving tent. It's not your fault, Naruto said quietly. As Shizen left the tent, Naruto turned his gaze to his best friend and crush. Sakura, is there anything that you can do? Kiba turned his hopeful eyes towards her, Shino as well. Alright, she sighed. But don't get your hopes up. I'm almost tapped out of chakra, and something of this scale should be attempted by Tsunade-sama, not me. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, Naruto said, hope in his voice once more. You're just as good as Ba-chan. Just do your best. Sakura looked towards the ground, eyes downcast. I'm not, you know. Tsunade-sama is still much better than me when it comes to medical jutsu. But I am one of the best, she said hurriedly as Naruto's face fell. Don't worry, Naruto, she'll be fine. That's my promise of a lifetime. I'll get started right away. I just need you to go and get me some of my special soldier pills. After waiting just long enough to hear her directions, Naruto dashed off to find her those pills as Sakura cracked her neck and got to work. He felt so relieved, full of confidence in his friend. 5 days later saw Naruto weaving towards the Hokage faces, drunker than Tsunade had ever been. Naruto's confidence had been misplaced. Despite all their efforts, all the hard work and time that had been poured into the cause, Sakura had failed on her promise of a lifetime. Those first 3 days had probably been the worst days of Naruto's life. He had never left her side, staying in her room during both day and night. His mind had been churning the whole time, never able to rest. He had not slept, he had not eaten, even when Sai had come and offered him some Ichiraku ramen. He had stayed seated, still as a statue as he had watched Hinata get weaker and weaker, hoping against hope that she would wake, that Sakura would be able to make some progress. Hoping for a miracle. The miracle never came. The best that Sakura had been able to do was make sure that Hinata was conscious to say her goodbyes. Tears ran down Naruto's face as he recalled her final moments. Hinata had died surrounded by her friends. Her father had broken down before her, apologizing over and over again for how he had treated her throughout her life. Hinata had forgiven him. With a small smile on her face, she told him that it was alright, that it didn't matter because no matter what had happened, she had still loved him. Hayashi had started weeping silent tears as he stared down at the young women on the bed. So much like your mother, he had whispered. Hinata had a few kind words to say to everyone, the rookies, her cousin and his team, Kurenai and her sister Hanabi. She made Hanabi swear to her that when she became clan head, she would outlaw the caged bird seal. And then, finally, it had been his turn to say goodbye. You were the first one, Hinata-chan. The first one to ever say that you loved me, Naruto whispered to the night sky. How Naruto wished that he'd been able to tell her that to her face. He had been the last one. The last one to speak to her before she slipped away. He had had so much to say, but in the end, he had not been able to say more than 3 words. Flashback. Naruto came to Hinata's bedside and stared wordlessly at Hinata's face. So pale, that face. He had never seen it that pale. Always when he saw it, it had been red and flushed. Reaching out his hand, he gently stroked her cheek, laying the palm of his hand against the side of her face. Though incredibly weak, Hinata still had the strength to place her hand on top of his own. There it was, a little of the color that so often graced her cheeks, but none of the usual heat. She was cold, so very cold. All of the words that usually came so easily to him simply died in his throat, replaced by a lump that threatened to choke him. Neither of them spoke, instead, they just stared into each other's eyes, lost in the moment, lost in what might have been. And then, the moment was over as Hinata's breath started to come in gasps, and she closed her eyes. Hinata, Naruto had choked out. She opened her eyes once more and squeezed his hand softly. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. It true why did lo dash, lo, she struggled so hard to get the words out, fighting not shyness, but the cold embrace of death. I loved you. A smile graced her beautiful features. Odd, Naruto had never thought of her as beautiful before. Now, as she smiled at her success, staring at him with all the truth and love that filled her lavender eyes, with his hand touching her face, he realized that in all his life he had never seen anything so lovely. Nor would he again. Hinata-heim, he said, his voice cracking in the middle of the words. Her smile had widened as she stared at him, her breast rising and falling as she breathed in and out. Rising and falling, rising and falling, rising and falling, Tears started slipping soundlessly down Naruto's face as he watched the light slowly leave her eyes. Hinata Hyuga gave one final, soft sigh as she slipped away from this world, from his world. But her hand never lost its grip on Naruto's. With the tears still running down his face, Naruto leaned forward and gathered her up to his chest, before he kissed her gently on the forehead. Trembling, he reached forward with the hand that was not clutched in hers and gently closed her eyes, hiding those lavender, pearl-like orbs. Tilting his head back, Naruto roared to the heavens, his grief made known to the entire village as his voice rose to the sky. His grief at losing one who had been precious to him. Perhaps more precious than he had ever known. Flashback end. Naruto was crying once more as he cast his mind back to that day. He could hear the whispers of those around him. Not whispers of hate, not anymore. They were worried about him. Kakashi, Sakura, Shizen, the Konohamaru Corps and even Irika had tried to comfort him. He would not be comforted. It was his fault, all his fault that Hinata was dead. Old man Hokage dead, Sasuke deserted me for power, Jiraiya dead. Bachan's in a coma, Shizen says that there's a strong chance that she'll never come out of it. And now Hinata, he choked, the words dying in his throat. He looked up once more to see all the anxious faces of both the villagers and the shinobi looking at him. Faces that just a few short years ago, scratch that, a few short months ago had been filled with hate. He laughed bitterly, not caring that his emotions were for once available for all to see. Funny, isn't it, he muttered under his breath. Used to be that all I ever wanted was to be accepted. Now I've achieved everything I have ever dreamed of. And I can't help but wish that things were back the way they were. Chapter 3. His father's scroll. He had stayed with her for hours after she had died, weeping softly, even though his tears had long since dried up. Niji, Hayashi and Hanabi had been the ones to finally take her from him. After they had left, he had stayed where he was, drinking only water, eating just a couple of Sakura's soldier pills a day. 2 days he sat there, with many people coming to talk to him, trying to make him come back to the world of the living. But he would never even speak a word back to them. He would not come back to their world, a world without Hinata in it. It was his fault, all his fault. Hinata was dead and the only one who was to blame was Uzumaki Naruto. It was Hayashi himself who had came and told him about Hinata's funeral. Naruto came back for that. He had stayed rooted to the spot throughout the entire ceremony, never saying a word to anyone, despite several attempts from people to engage him in conversation, standing like a dead statue. Once again, Naruto was the last one to say a final goodbye. He only wished that this time, she had been able to hear him. Hinata's grave was covered in white flowers. His had been the only one that was different, a lavender lily. White flowers were so common at a funeral. Naruto had wanted his last gift to the uncommon girl to be something unique. Besides, the flower matched her eyes, at least, when they still burned with the spark of life. After placing his flower on top of all of the others, Naruto looked up at the bright blue sky. It made him angry. With moisture welling up in his eyes, he cursed the cloud-free heavens, absently noting that it appeared as if he still had some tears left to cry. It had been raining during the old man Hokage's funeral. It had rained when he had found out about Jiraiya's death. Why was it that the heavens did not weep at Hinata's funeral? Hinata had been good and kind, always doing so much to help others. She had been a rarity in this hate-filled world. And yet, as she was lowered into her grave, the sun still smiled down upon the world. Did the heavens not care for one of their own? He left as he came, never saying a word. Alone. He wanted to be left alone. They would not leave him alone. But now, 5 days after his victory and Hinata's injury, he was alone. It had taken a while to get rid of his friends, but he had done it, eventually. Even after he walked into that dingy little bar, they had still tried to be with him. Naruto sniffed, starting to feel just a little guilty. They were true friends, but he had needed to be alone to come to terms with his grief. He had thought that the drink might help and had asked them to join him. They had been a bit hesitant at first, at least, until Kiba had joined Naruto with a bottle of sake. After that, most of them had soon joined in. They had matched him drink for drink, trying to push away their own grief. Aside from Naruto and Neji, Kiba and Shino were the hardest hit. After all, Hinata had been teammate, but she had been so much more than that. She had been their friend, their little sister. And now she was gone. Those two lasted the longest, out of the entire group. After a while, Kiba and surprisingly, Shino, had begun to talk to each other and to Naruto about Hinata. The missions that they had been on together, the good times shared, as well as the bad, the people that they had met, the times of laughter and joy, the times of tears and bonding. Naruto just sat and listened, letting their words wash over him as he burned the images they reproduced deep into his mind. Never forget. He never wanted to forget a thing about her. Then, they began talking to him about what he had done for Hinata. She never gave up, no matter how hard the obstacles in front of her may have seemed, Shino said, his voice more than a little bit slurred. She said that you had inspired her, not with just your words, but with the way that you lived your life. So she never stopped trying to improve herself. Not only as a ninja, but as a person as well. Kiba nodded, almost falling off his stool as he did so. Ya don't know how many times I found out that she had been crying because of all the shit that her family always seemed to be dealing out to her. I don't know if she would have ever been able to deal with it if it weren't for you. A whole heap of it came from Neji at this. Kiba gave the unconscious Neji a kick in the side, when he was still a stuck-up bastard with a stick the size of a holy log up his ass. But after you beat that fake crap out of him and some sense into him, things started to change. Her family started to resemble an actual family, if you know what I mean. There've only ever been a few times when I saw her that happy, he finished, downing the last of his bottle. You helped her so much, without ever being aware of it, Shino said. Thank you, the last of teammates said in one voice. Naruto had bowed his head down and wept at that, not caring that they could see. They had drank some more after that and talked, then drank a whole lot more. But now, as far as Naruto knew, he and Lee were the only ones that were not in some form of alcohol-induced coma. Except for Sakura, of course, but she hadn't joined in with the rest of them. Something about the fact that she had seen Tsunade drunk way too many times. Stepping over Neji and Tenten, Naruto had moved over to Lee's twitching form and pried open an eyelid. Yep, he was unconscious, from exhaustion that is. When the group had walked into the building, the bartender took one look at Lee's green spandex-clad form and had been reduced to a gibbering wreck. Apparently, he had already had prior experience to Lee's drunken habits. He had only agreed to serve them on the condition that Lee was not to touch alcohol in any type, shape, or form. Literally, he wasn't allowed to touch the stuff. The bartender had thrown a fit after he saw Lee pass Choji a bottle of sake. Not wanting to be left out, Lee had proclaimed that he would do 100 push-ups for every bottle of alcohol that Naruto had. By the time he had passed out, he was 1, maybe 2,000 push-ups behind. Naruto wasn't quite sure how far behind he was now. Alcohol was a poison, and like any other poison, Naruto burned it out of his system quickly, too quickly. Naruto had then left the bar and started walking down the street, a slight weave in his steps. But still, there were people trying to talk to him. He needed to go away, just for a little while, where he would not be found. But where? Naruto never actually made a conscious decision of where to go, he just followed his feet. So it was with great surprise that he found himself walking towards the top of the Hokage monument. But no matter, he knew where he was going now. There was an old house further in, on the plains that made up a part of the mountain. Just over 16 years ago, it had belonged to Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage of Konoha. It was kind of funny in an ironic sort of way. Naruto had always looked up to the 4th as his hero, one who had sacrificed his life for the village he loved. As such, he had devoured any and all information on the 4th that he could find. Naruto knew much about Minato the Hokage, but hardly anything about Minato the man and nothing at all about Minato the father. His father. Walking up to the door, the 4th's legacy tried to open it. It was locked, of course, it had been locked for 16 years. Naruto tried the handle again, this time shaking the door violently. A seal slowly etched itself onto the door, before red ink started oozing its way across the lines of the seal, reminding one of the way blood traveled across skin from an open wound. Finally the seal was complete, a blood red in color, almost as if it were warning him. Naruto stared at the seal for a short while. Taking out a kunai, he closed his hand around it and pulled, not caring how deeply it cut. Naruto looked absently at the palm of his hand and his fingers, watching as his blood welled up from the cuts, before slowly moving down the palm of his hand. The way that seal had applied itself had been telling him something, it had to have been. Naruto stretched forth his hand and placed it on the center of the seal. Slowly, the seal changed color, becoming steadily brighter before it exploded in a bright flash of yellow, to reveal nothing. There was no change, his blood no longer even marked the door, but amazingly, the cut on his hand had already healed, and this time, it had not been because of the fox's chakra. Once more, Naruto tried the handle. It turned. The door opened. Dust covered every surface, the dust of 16 years' worth of abandonment. It didn't take him very long to look around the place. The kitchen was neat and tidy, with a granite bench for cooking and a gas stove. A set of knives hung above the stove, each one on their own hook. Walking over to them, he took the biggest down off of its hook. It was still sharp. Next, Naruto turned to the walk-in pantry. When he opened the first cupboard door, Naruto laughed out loud, for the first time in days. There, stacked upon one another, squeezed together, was a cupboard that was completely stocked, of instant ramen. Chuckling slightly, he went throughout the rest of the house. His mother and father had kept a very tidy place. Soon, there were only 2 rooms left to look at. The master bedroom and his father's study. He went to the bedroom first. The bed was unmade. For some reason, this made Naruto extremely happy, while at the same time sad. Here, in this room, was evidence of his parents' lives. They had been here, in this very room, they had slept in this very bed. A lump rose in his throat as he noticed the crib that had been placed at the right-hand side of the bed. His crib. This was where he may have stayed if life had turned out differently. Swallowing, he turned back to his parents' bed. The sheets were still crinkled and most of the covers had been pulled over to right side, the side closest to his crib. On each side of the bed stood a small chest of drawers, with a lamp on each surface. He moved to the one closest to the crib. Only now did he notice the katana balanced between the bed and the drawers. He'd take a look at that later. Carefully, Naruto opened the first drawer. It had obviously belonged to a female. His mother. That indicated that it was his mother who had the habit of hogging all the covers to herself. Naruto wondered briefly what his father thought of that habit. Maybe that's why she's got a katana lying next to her bed within easy reach, he thought, chuckling a little at the mental image it produced. Sitting down on the bed, he laid the katana on his knees and bared about half of the blade from its sheath. Made with exceptional craftsmanship, the steel had a blue tinge to it. Naruto's eyebrows raised. Not only that, it seemed as if the entire thing had been forged out of that insanely expensive chakra-conducting metal, which had been layered many, many times over. Fishing around in his pocket, Naruto came across an unused tissue. Sakura had made him carry a bunch of them around with him, stating that he shouldn't use his sleeve, which he had been doing a lot whenever he thought of Naruto stopped his train of thought. Holding the tissue over the blade, he let it float softly down into the edge, which parted it effortlessly. Still razor sharp, the blade bore obvious signs of use. Sweat stains could be seen on the red leather grip of the hilt, which matched the scabbard, but it had been extremely well maintained. Breathing out gently, Naruto slid the blade back into its sheath and turned to the first open drawer containing his mother's belongings. Tenderly, Naruto took out each item, holding it as if it were a treasure beyond price. A rope of pearls, with a large pink one in the center. Matching earrings, a jewelry box. His mother had liked pretty things, either that or his dad had liked buying them for her. Naruto gently opened the jewelry box, wincing slightly at the squeak that came from the hinges. He remove each item, instead, he just trailed his fingers over them gently, content to just look them over. At the very back of the first drawer, Naruto found his mother's hairbrush. It was a cheap thing, built for usability, not beauty, but there was one thing that made it very important to Naruto. His mother had used it, and often, and as of such, it still had some of her hair caught in the brush's bristles. My mother had red hair, Naruto whispered. In the second drawer down were 3 bottles of perfume. 2 of them were open and one of them had never been used. They were all the same brand and make. They must have been his mother's favorite. Stuffed next to and underneath the perfume was a large number of woolen gloves and the occasional scarf, making a nest for the delicate little glass bottles. Included in this were several pairs of booties and baby gloves. Apparently, his mother got cold in the evening. Taking one of the gloves, he splayed against his own hand, noting with a smile how much larger his hands were than the glove. His mother had delicate, small hands, although, judging from the sweat stains on the katana's hilt, maybe not so delicate. Sword work like that was bound to get you calluses. Next, Naruto took one of the used bottles of perfume and sprayed it on his wrist before taking a small sniff. His face paled. Stiffly, almost woodenly, he replaced the lid and put the perfume back into the drawer. It bore the smell of lilacs, lavender as well as another scent that he could not identify. What were the odds that his mother would have worn the same type of perfume as Hinata? Naruto closed the drawer and without looking at the third and final drawer, moved over to his father's side of the bed. His dad's drawers were quite different. He had no jewelry in them for one. Instead, in his first drawer was a well-read, highly creased copy of Tales of a Gutsy Ninja, written by Ero Sennin. A picture of Minato's team was also there, with Kakashi in the center of the photo and 2 others that Naruto could not identify. Next to the picture was what looked like a weird kunai, with 3 distinct prongs. Naruto picked it up and ran his finger along the edge. Ah! Still sharp, he muttered, sticking his finger into his mouth and sucking, wondering absent-mindedly if there was some kind of seal on the house that kept those things inside sharp. There were some other miscellaneous items in the second drawer, but what Naruto's eyes were immediately drawn to was a Jiraiya-sized box of condoms. Naruto blushed. He knew about the birds and the bees, thanks to a very embarrassing session with Jiraiya during his 3-year training trip, but surely it was unhealthy to think of your parents doing that. I mean, come on. That box is more than half empty, Naruto thought, waving his hands in front of him as if they could somehow prevent the mental trauma. Although, come to think of it, Pervy Sage's box never got that empty. Apart from that one time that when he had run out of water balloons for Rasengan training and found out that the replacements that Jiraiya had given him were actually let's not go there, that was what had originally brought up that highly embarrassing conversation in the first place. Well, that and his reaction. The only consolation for him was that for once the old pervert seemed to be more embarrassed than he was. He had got so flustered that he had turned a brighter shade of red than Hinata. Naruto left the bedroom, traveling to the only other room left in the house that he had not already inspected. It looked as if this had been his father's study. There was a window looking out to a view of Konoha. Naruto stopped for a moment, and just looked out at his home. The sun had started to set, bathing the village in liquid golden light. Smoke could be seen rising from the chimneys of several houses. It blew and fluttered in the breeze, catching the light in its own unique way, making patterns across the village. The sunlight reflected strongly off of several reflective surfaces, creating silver gems of light, which were randomly scattered across the village. His home was a beautiful place, that much could be easily seen. Or at least, that is what he imagined could have once been seen. Now, his father's study no longer looked over the village that he had once sworn to protect as its Hokage. All that remained was a crated, gouged roughly into the ground. That, and the rubble and debris of what had once been the homes and livelihoods of the thousands that had made up the strongest of the hidden villages. No longer the tall buildings, the straight roads and the winding streets. No longer the beautiful gardens that had studded the area, relieving the sometime monotonous background of the village life. No more Ichiraku stand either. But that wasn't really all that important. The village could and would be rebuilt. It would just take time. And time was not important, only life was important. Naruto smiled a bit as he could easily see the tent city that had sprung up in the crater from here. It was even possible to see the piles of lumber that had been brought in for the builders to work with. There were even a couple of rows of houses that Captain Yamato had apparently built using his woodjutsu. Although, those houses did bring a slightly sour taste to his mouth. He had been told that Danzo, the elders and that most of the civilian council had taken those houses for their own. But all that he could see from here pointed toward the incontrovertible truth. Konoha lived on. Its people lived on. At least most of them did. With a sigh, Naruto turned his attention to the rest of the room. He stiffened. There was something wrong with this room. Every other room in the house had been reasonably clean and organized. Not this one. Both of the walls on his left and right side had bookcases at the walls. The one on the left only had a bookcase running from 1.5 meters above the floor to the ceiling. A desk was underneath it. Another big desk this time was underneath the window overlooking Konoha. The bookcase on the right of the room went from floor to ceiling. But something had happened in here. The room had scrolls tossed onto the floor, books thrown into corners of the room. Files had been emptied, drawers were left open. It looked as if the room had been ransacked. Rushing hurriedly into the room, Naruto bent down and picked up a scroll, before unrolling it. Wind-style void. These were jutsu scrolls and by the looks of them, quite valuable. If a thief had broken in looking for something valuable, then there was no way that he, or she, would have left something like this just lying around. Which meant that his first, panicked guess of the mess being caused by a burglar breaking in was unfounded. But still, the room had been trashed, and if someone that was looking for some jutsu to add to their collection didn't do it, then it must have been someone that his parents had trusted. Hell, his father himself probably did it. A sudden thought brought him to the realization that he might have been a bit hasty with his jumping to conclusions. How would a thief have got through the security seals anyway? No, it had probably been his father. But whoever it was, they had obviously gone through the scrolls and books that had probably once been neatly arranged on their shelves, searching for something in particular. Naruto looked around the room, trying to read the story that was there for anyone who could tell the signs. Moving from left to right on the shelves that surrounded the study, someone had started by flicking through the scrolls that were stacked together. As they went along, the person had started taking out the scrolls and putting them on the desk below the shelves. Then they seemed to get frantic, throwing stuff to the ground as they ripped through the scrolls and books that were on the shelves, finally finding whatever it was that they were looking for on the right-hand wall. They had then swept everything that had originally been on the desk onto the floor, spreading a specific scroll into the desk, weighing it down with some kunai. Curiously, Naruto stepped towards the desk and had a look at the scroll that had been searched for so frantically. His eyes widened and an expression of hope crossed his features. Grabbing the scroll, he ran outside. This scroll could solve everything, if he used its contents correctly. Now Naruto would learn another one of his father's original jutsu, and once more, he would make it his own. Chapter 4. To go back. Naruto unrolled the blueprints of the Shiki Fujin seal out onto the grass in front of him. This seal had been the cause of so much pain and anguish in his life. On October 10th, 16 years ago, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, had used this technique to seal the Kyuubi no Kitsune inside of him. That was the way that all Jinchuriki were created, by having a bija sealed inside of them. But different bija had different strengths, which meant that the strength of the seal had to be proportionate to the strength of the demon. The fox was the most powerful of all the tailed beasts, known by some as the king of the Biju. As of such, one of the most powerful seals in existence was used to contain the Kyuubi within Naruto. To be precise, the Shiki Fujin seal. But it was not without a cost. The Shiki Fujin seal worked by summoning the Shinigami, the death god himself. Then working together, the fourth Hokage and the death god acted in concert to seal the Kyuubi within Naruto, using the Yandame's own life force to power the jutsu. But the important part of this jutsu, the part that Naruto was interested in, was the fact that it first acted to summon the Shinigami to the mortal plane. Slowly, Naruto began forming the necessary hand seals. Shiki Fujin, Naruto roared out, slamming his hands against the ground. Nothing happened, at least, at first. Naruto only had to wait for a short while before the very air around him began to grow cold. The shadows lengthened and darkened, seemingly reaching out like a certain Naruto's jutsu. But the malevolent intent that came with those shadows made one thing perfectly clear. Whatever was the cause of this darkness, it was not human. The light dimmed, becoming fainter and fainter, seemingly being eaten by the shadows themselves. Then, the darkness began to converge, seemingly building up on top of itself, rising up into a single black mound. Slowly, ever so slowly, the mound began taking shape, the shape of a man. First of the limbs could be distinguished, the head. Slowly, ever so slowly, details began to become visible. Finally, it was finished and a man stepped forth from the shadows. Or at least, it looked like a man. A black cloak covered the figure completely, with a hood thrown over his face, leaving it in shadow. No, not just shadow, it was more like an abyss. Clutched in a bony hand was a large scythe, so sharp that seemed to Naruto as if it would cut you if you simply looked at it. The scythe was held in the figure's left hand. But such a hand, death had already touched that hand. Only small strips of rotted flesh clung to the otherwise stripped clean bone. The figure raised his other hand slowly to his hood, before throwing it back suddenly, revealing the empty eye sockets with a cold light burning behind them, the yellow teeth that were in a death's head grin, and the empty pit where a nose had once been. A feeling of such malice filled the area, such malevolence, that Naruto almost shouted out in fear. Yet something stopped him. "Why are you wearing reading glasses?" With a startled look, the figure whipped the glasses off his face, revealing another surprising feature to Naruto. "Your fingers are ink-stained." Folding his arms, the figure spoke. "Who are you to summon death?" Naruto looked at the scroll once more, cursing under his breath. Apparently, he had not done the jutsu correctly. "Wrong number?" Naruto said, slightly embarrassed. The figure blinked. Well, who exactly were you looking for? The god of the dead? Naruto nodded. Almost excitedly, the figure leaned forward. Now, don't tell me which aspect you're looking for. I'll figure it out myself. He began walking around Naruto, sizing him up. Let's see, idealistic, always keeps his word, obviously the hero type with the body of a Greek G. I know. You're looking for Hades. At this, the figure changed into a tall, ripped man with long, black, slightly greasy hair, wearing a black toga that had tortured faces moving within the fabric, with a black helmet under his arm and a sword at his waist. No? Naruto shook his head, consternation clear on his face. Alright, well, you're a bit short, but with that warrior light and those blue eyes and that blonde hair, you must be a Viking, so you're looking for Hela, right? No, Naruto interrupted. Damn, you're not Egyptian, so Anubis is out. You didn't recognize the Grim Reaper, and I doubt you're an African, so. I was born in Konoha. Naruto shouted out, feeling slightly annoyed. At this, the figure stilled, before turning into the Shinigami himself. The scythe changed into a knife, which he clenched between his teeth. The teeth were set in the face of a demon. Shinigami's clothes became a sickly white in color. Konoha, you say? Oh, that's right, I can see the height now. Tell me, do you know anything about a disturbance that happened here about 5 days ago? A great commotion happened within my realm, the Shinigami spoke casually, as if the answer to his question had no importance. You're the Shinigami? Naruto asked. The figure nodded. Sorry about earlier, I have a multiple personality disorder. Answer the question. No. Give me back. Answer the question first, then we'll carry on with this conversation. The statement was said in a pleasant tone, yet there was something that caused even the knucklehead ninja to shut his mouth. Now, did anything unusual happen 5 days ago? Oh yeah, that was Nagato. He used a resurrection technique at the cost of his own life. And he did this why? Because of me. A rough sound seemed to come from the Shinigami. It was only later that Naruto realized he had been grinding his teeth. Alright, now, what was it that you wanted? Give me back Hinata-chan. That's it. The Shinigami exploded. You're the reason why I'm up to my eyebrows in paperwork with that stunt that you pulled getting so many souls out of the underworld. Do you have any fucking idea how many forms I have to fill out for every bloody person who ends up dead in the first place? And then not only do they become immediately useless, but I have to fill them in anyway, 'cause they did actually die, and then there's like 12 times the amount of crap that I've got to fill out for every person that lives again, and then you come and ask me to add to that burden? Actually, you didn't even bother to bloody well ask now, did you? Instead, you come with your demands and insist that I use my power to give you back your loved one. Naruto blushed suddenly at the word loved. And to top it off, you don't even use the right summoning method. This is the Shiki-Fujin seal. What did you want to seal? The demand was angry, and by this time, the Shinigami had yelled so much that he had gone red in the face, although, thanks to his original color, he was now a startling pink in color. Nothing, Naruto said, trying hard not to cower from the huge killing intent that he was being subjected to. The Shinigami nodded with an evil smile. Done. And now I take my payment. Your soul. As he said it, the Shinigami flickered appeared before Naruto and plunged his hand into Naruto's stomach. A cold such as Naruto had never before experienced before in his life seemed to pervade every fiber of his being, emanating from his stomach. An unearthly power started acting against him. Naruto felt his strength begin to drain as he fell down to his knees. He had failed, and now he was going to die, all because he did not think things through. A horrible thought occurred to him. The ones who died from this jutsu would be sealed within the Shinigami's stomach. Even in death, he would not get to apologize to Hinata. Well shit, Kit, you really have a talent for pissing people off. That voice, Naruto knew that voice. Liquid fire started rushing down his veins, combating the killing cold. Naruto groaned, in that instant becoming so much more than just a human. He was a battleground, the meeting between two great oceans, as two powers as old as the world itself warred within him. Pain, an overwhelming pain rushed through his body wherever hot met cold. But slowly, the fire won out. Pushing against that unearthly power, it finally reached its originating point, and with a howl reminiscent to pain, the Shinigami pulled his hand out of Naruto's stomach. Oh yeah. I still got it, baby. Man, what a rush. Coming out on top in a battle with the Shinigami himself. Ah. When was the last time I did something like that? The Kyuubi no Kitsune cried out, inside Naruto's head, who was able to hear him because of the large amounts of demon chakra pumping through his body. Kyuubi, Naruto said. What? The fox yelled, slightly upset that Naruto had interrupted his euphoric rant. After all, it wasn't often that he came up against an adversary that he actually considered his equal. Thanks. The fox was shocked. It was not often that his jailer ever expressed anything resembling gratitude. You're welcome. In the meantime, the Shinigami was shaking his arm, cursing underneath his breath. It was a bright, cherry red in color. His other hand, however, was pressed against his belly. Still swearing, he changed into an ordinary, if overly handsome, man before popping the cap of what looked like a bottle of antacids and chugging the entire contents. "You're a Jinchuriki, aren't you?" Naruto nodded. The Shinigami swore loudly. "I guess you aren't as stupid as you look. You must have known that I can't come into contact with one of the immortals." "Right," Naruto said. The Shinigami didn't notice his confusion, as he continued to rub his stomach. "This must be one of the biggest cases of indigestion I've ever had. You wouldn't happen to know anybody in here, would you?" "Yeah, Minato Namike is an old man Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi." The Shinigami froze. "What did you say your name was?" "Naruto Uzumaki." The Shinigami flinched. "Well, crap, that was close." "What do you mean?" Shinigami snorted. "Well, isn't it obvious? I tried to eat the chosen one. Can you imagine how much paperwork I'd have to fill in for something like that? Then there's the fact that if you die, the upcoming Fourth Shinobi War will be lost, hundreds of thousands will end up dead, and the Eye of the Moon plan will succeed, or would it? After all, they wouldn't have the Kyuubi. So they wouldn't be able to resurrect the Jubi until the Kyuubi reformed, not to mention I'd never get a chance at that son of a bitch Madara's dirty old soul." "Does that mean that you'll help me?" Naruto asked, hope once more in his voice. "No." Anger flashed in Naruto's eyes. "Come on. You were willing to kill me just for the sake of a little bit of extra paperwork. Don't call it a little extra paperwork. That shit is the paperwork from hell. Literally. If you don't help me, I'll find another way, even if it means I have to kill myself, I will." Shinigami looked at Naruto, humor in his eyes. "No, you wouldn't. You've still got too many promises to complete in this world. But why would you go that far?" Naruto sighed and sank to the ground. "I don't know. My parents died when I was just a baby and I was a Jinchuriki. I never received any love as a kid. I was always so lonely. I sometimes got beaten. I never had any friends until after I became a genin. I did so much to earn acceptance from those around me, but even when I was hated by most of those around me, there was one person who always looked up to me. That person was Hinata. I'm almost 17 years old, and Hinata was the first one who ever said that she loves me. She loved me. And I failed her. Because of me, she's dead." A look of determination came across his face. "So I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Do you hear me? No matter what the cost, I'll pay it, as long as I get her back." "Oh, be a dear Gamikun, give the boy back his girlfriend." Both Naruto and the Shinigami jumped into the air at the sound of the very feminine voice behind them. They turned to see a beautiful woman behind them. Shinigami sighed. "Naruto, meet my wife." If Naruto were ever asked to describe her, he would say that he was completely unable to put to words such a beauty, although the real cause may have been self-memory manipulation, since the Shinigami specifically stated that if he ever had perverted thoughts about his wife, he would wake up one morning and find himself castrated. "She's not my girlfriend, Mrs. Oh, call me Arlia, dear." The Shinigami sighed. "That's not her real name. Names have power among those as powerful as us. Why did you think that the Kyuubi is always called by a title rather than a name? Anyway, you say she's not your girlfriend? Why? The girl said she loved you and you obviously have some kind of feelings for her, otherwise why are you going through all this trouble to get her back?" "I don't know what I feel for her. She's a friend, sure, and I would do anything for my friends. As for the trouble, well, I never really planned any of this. After I saw the scroll, it all just seemed to happen." "You mean you summoned my husband, the god of death himself, on a whim?" Naruto put his hand behind his neck and scratched, wearing a rueful grin on his face. "Well, when you put it that way, it does seem kind of stupid. But I thought that there was chance that this would work, so I didn't need to think about it anymore." Arlia turned what seemed remarkably similar to the dreaded puppy dog eyes no jutsu on the Shinigami, who winced visibly. "Damn it, woman! It's not that fucking easy. What did you say to me?" Her voice was quiet, but the Shinigami himself, god of the death, lord of the underworld, king of the dead and prince of darkness, cowered before his wife's angry gaze. "I mean, I'm dreadfully sorry, my beloved, but I am afraid that what you are asking of me can simply not be done. I'm lord of the dead. Unfortunately, when I took the job, the small print in the contract stated that I could not send someone back of my own accord. It would set an extremely dangerous precedent." Arlia stared at Naruto, and he felt himself being weighed, measured and examined in hundreds of different ways. This woman seemed to look at his very soul. It needs to be done. With this burden added to the rest of them that he carries, he will not be able to win the upcoming war. He will fail, and the world will fall. The Shinigami cursed and muttered under his breath. Naruto was fairly certain he heard the word paperwork somewhere in the middle of his rant. "Well, that sucks." "Really?" Naruto said sarcastically. "Does that mean that you won't help me?" "No, of course we'll help you, won't we, Gamikun?" Arlia said, turning with a smile to the Shinigami, or Gamikun. He winced at the nickname before speaking. I told you, dear, it's not that simple. I am physically unable to let one loose from my kingdom. It is an impossibility. What about a resurrection technique? Arlia asked. The Shinigami just looked at her, then looked at Naruto. Do you know any resurrection techniques? Naruto shook his head. So that's a no-go as well. Besides, the only time a resurrection technique doesn't cost you your own life is if you have the Rinnegan. He doesn't, so if he used one, he'd end up dead and the world is doomed anyway. Well, that's just great, isn't it? What else am I supposed to do? Turn back time to when Hinata was still alive? Naruto asked sarcastically. Arlia looked excited. Dear? The Shinigami, however, just shook his head, a slightly evil gleam in his eyes. It wouldn't work. The time travel technique requires chakra, something that I don't have anymore. It was taken from me when I kidnapped you to be my wife. Naruto latched onto the idea with a fierce determination. What about my chakra? You can use mine to power the jutsu. Shinigami just snorted. Kid, you ain't got near enough chakra to go back a single day. And the fox's chakra sealed inside of you is good enough for maybe 6 more days. And even if you got the rest of it, that only leaves you with what, 1 more day to prepare? This is a once-off technique, kid, it only works 1 time per person. With only 1 more day, the end result will be the same. Naruto glared at him. Give me 3, maybe 4 days and I'll come to you with enough power to get the job done. The Shinigami laughed and laughed at him, before Arlia socked him one in the stomach, then he just crouched over and wheezed. It's not going to happen, kid, even if you do gain the necessary power, which you won't. Arlia, can I speak to you for a second? Nodding, the Shinigami's wife stopped pouting at her husband and came over to Naruto, who whispered into her ear. Ooh, I like that, Arlia giggled. Alright, sweetie, I'm in. Shinigami. I, Naruto Uzumaki, swear by my father's memory that if you do not help me, then I will not succeed in fulfilling the prophecy. The world will fall and Kami will blame you. The paperwork that you'll be landed with will be of proportions that you have not seen in all your millennia. And I say that if you don't help him, then you'll be sleeping on the couch for the next 20 years, Arlia threatened him. The Shinigami looked from one to another. I've had people offer me all the wealth they possess, heroes have entered my realm trying to steal from me, people have sold me their souls, or those of their wife, daughter, mother, brother, son, father, or sister, dark rituals have been held in my honor. With countless human sacrifices and in all the thousands of years that this has been happening, there has not been a single person who has got the best of me. And now you come along, Naruto Uzumaki, with the threat of making me do more paperwork and convincing my wife not to give me any for 20 years. That's the best you can do? That's what you're going to blackmail me with? Naruto nodded. Yep. The Shinigami sighed. Damn, you're good. I'll see you in 4 days. Call out for me when you have the power at the ready and I shall come before you to help you on your way. Naruto was searching the campsite, looking for one of 2 men. If he was going to do this, he would need their help. All of a sudden, he heard cries of horror and pain, with one man screaming, "My eyes! My eyes!" repeatedly. By the sounds of things, he had found both of them. Ignoring the hideous sights around him, he pulled Lee and Guy apart, for the first time in history breaking the ultimate sunset genjutsu. Green beasts of Konoha. I have a favor to ask of you. Slightly annoyed at being broken apart, Guy looked at who had been foolish enough to do so, intending on insisting that they join him for a day's training. When he saw who it was, he forgot about his earlier intentions. It was Naruto, who once more had the fires of youth burning in his eyes. He would do anything he could to help the youthful hero of Konoha. We'll do whatever we can to help you, Naruto. Consider your favor already done. That's a promise, Guy exclaimed, ending his speech with his thumb up, almost blinding the onlookers with the glint of light coming off his teeth. The nice guy pose. They were now bound to keep their word. Thank you, Guy-sama. I need you and Lee to teach me how to use the Hashiman. 3 days later, Naruto moved to the largest of the intact training grounds, a forest area with a great deal of life within it. He had done it. Although Guy and Lee were harsh taskmasters, using the Hashiman was surprisingly easy after you got the hang of opening the first 3 gates. Opening the first one was actually the hardest task of all. It had taken him almost half a day to learn how to do that. Well, half a day with just over 3,000 Kage Bunshin working alongside of him. Both Lee and Guy had been amazed at his progress, before he told them that he had effectively done over 4 years' worth of training. He could create a whole lot more clones using Sage Mode if he didn't use any as spare batteries to store nature chakra. He had created so many that Yamato-sensei had been afraid that he would not be able to keep up if any of them went QB. But with both of the green beasts there to help, any clone looking as if he was starting to get some more fox-like characteristics quickly went poof. Naruto could use the Hashiman now. But he needed more power than just the gates could provide. Naruto snorted at himself thinking that he needed more power, quickly running through his mind to check if it was starting to resemble a certain emo Uchiha. No? Good. Luckily, he knew how he could get it. Moving towards the center of a clearing, Naruto sat down on a large boulder that stood within the middle of the area and set a small container in front of him. Getting into a meditative stance, he breathed deeply, forcing his body to be perfectly still. First gate, gate of opening, open. Naruto could feel the rush of power that flowed throughout his body. Gate of healing, open. He could feel the amount of chakra he contained multiplying within him. Gate of life, open. By now, his skin had turned red from the increase in blood flow. Gate of pain, open. After passing this point, any more movements would begin to tear his muscles apart, but thanks to his sage training he was able to remain completely immobile. Gate of closing, open. It was becoming so much harder now to stay still. All the energy within him made him feel full, almost bursting to release it. Gate of joy, open. Cracks shot through the boulder Naruto was sitting on as he opened the sixth gate. Suddenly, Naruto felt himself get pulled into his own mindscape. What the fuck do you think you're doing? Kyubi asked, sounding slightly miffed. Even more so than usual. Getting power so that I can use that time travel jutsu so that I can save Hinata. You fool, if you open all the gates, you'll kill us both. Naruto just shook his head. Not right away. Guy said that most men could last at least 3 minutes after opening the gate of death. With my healing factor, I can more than triple that time. Plenty enough for me to gather all the power I need. Gate of wonder, open. Mad. You truly are mad. Don't you realize that in the last few seconds of your life, I'll break free of this accursed prison and lay waste to all around me? Naruto smiled. Nice try, furball, but the gate of death causes your heart to explode. Death is pretty much instantaneous. Kyubi snarled menacingly at him. Damn you! Don't you realize that even if you open all the gates you still won't have enough power to go far enough back in time? I know. So you're going to help me. Gate of death, open. As Naruto said these words, he once more became conscious of the world around him. A great pillar of blue chakra had shot up into the air, visible to everyone from miles around. Chakra seemed to be leaking off of him, in quantities great enough to create a pseudo-jinchuriki. Many shinobi were by now on the way to see what the cause of this disturbance was. Naruto quelled the urge to smirk. It would take them a while to get here. He, and as many clones as possible, had been making as many traps as possible. Although non-lethal, there was such a great number of them that the area was practically inaccessible. Re-entering his mindscape, Naruto walked toward the doors of the cage and stood before the great gate. So what do you say, Kyubi? Want to help me? Without waiting for an answer, Naruto ripped the paper seal off the doors of the cage. With a howl of joy, the Kyubi leapt forward, sending all of his chakra towards Naruto, intent on taking over the foolish mortal and gaining his freedom. Fool! Don't you realize that I can still heal your body before taking it over? He yelled gleefully. All of a sudden, the fox frantically began trying to withdraw his chakra, but Naruto held on to it with all his might. Gotcha! Naruto said with a satisfied grin on his face. As soon as he had removed the seal, Naruto had started drawing sage chakra into his body. The seal had been removed, all the chakra of the nine-tailed fox was set loose within him. But your chakra comes in two forms, doesn't it, furball? Chakra and will. It was your will that kept on trying to take over my body, but if you use your will now, then I'll move and we'll both end up being a large stone toad. You wouldn't like that now, would you? The legend of the Kyubi no Kitsune finished with him becoming a petrified amphibian. Curse you. Naruto chuckled to himself as he felt the Kyubi's chakra meld with his own physical and spiritual chakra. If he went into sage mode like this, he would have close to twice the amount of chakra as the fox ever had at his disposal. But he feared that it wouldn't be enough. He still needed more. Steeling himself, he stopped drawing on the natural energy around him for just long enough to swallow the contents of the box he had set in front of him, his heart in his throat as he had to reach over to where the vibrations caused by his chakra had sent it. In a single, jerking motion, he swallowed the entirety of its contents and immediately started drawing slowly on the natural chakra surrounding him. He almost winced at the pain that the Akimichi's colored pills caused his system. But he could feel the inhuman boost that the spinach, curry, and chili pills gave him. Each pill multiplied the amount of chakra held within a person's body. The chili pill alone gave you 100 times as much chakra. But in taking them all at once, the pills were normally used exclusively by the Akimichi clan, since the pills worked by converting the body's fat cells into chakra, something that the Akimichis always had a surplus of. But if there were not enough fat reserves, then the pills would break down any and every other energy-rich type of cell in the body, which was what caused death in any other person. Cells, which, in Naruto's case, were replicating at an extraordinary rate, thanks to Kyubi's influence. The rock underneath him was completely ground away and Naruto started forming his own crater thanks to the intensity of his chakra. His chakra coils had long since fractured and split asunder, only the Kyubi's influence keeping a tenuous grasp on the ocean of power that raged within. When he felt his chakra reach its peak, Naruto began drawing deeply on any available nature chakra, striving to create a balance with the energy already within him. It was too much for the things that surrounded him. Like a stain spreading out from where Naruto sat, the plants around him began to turn brown and die as the energy he drew from them exceeded their limits. The tree around him lost their leaves, which had turned brown and brittle, before the trunks themselves began to wither. Like a wave, the desolation spread quickly. Seeing the devastation move towards them, the ninja who were within seconds of coming into contact with Naruto turned and fled. A circle of ruin almost 5.5 miles in diameter now stood where once had been a heavily forested area, Naruto in the center of it all. Within that circle, there was utter silence. Not even the sound of insects permeated the area. Naruto opened his eyes, revealing the orange markings that marked him as a sage, taking in the destruction that surrounded him. Clouds of earth were floating around him, buoyed up by the very pressure of the power that he held, a power that could be felt by all the inhabitants of the elemental nations. And yet Naruto knew that if he even tried to channel it, he would be obliterated. "I call upon you, Shinigami!" There was no dramatic appearance this time. The Shinigami just blinked into view, wearing the form of the man that he had left as that of an ordinary man. "Shit, kid! What in the hell did you do?" The court of the gods itself was almost pissing itself when it felt what you were releasing. No mortal should have that kind of power, or so they say. Despite his words, the Shinigami could not help but let the smallest hints of admiration tinge his voice. This mortal was iterating. "Is it enough?" Naruto asked, his voice strained. Holding this much power was overwhelming him, even with the healing that both the Kyuubi's chakra and Sage mode provided. The Shinigami snorted. "Hell yeah, it is. At this point of time, you're holding more power than any other mortal has ever held on this planet. Pity you can't do anything with it for fear of going kablooey. Cutting it kind of close though, aren't you? From my count you're going to be gone in 32 seconds? He said, speaking as if he were holding a casual conversation with a stranger. Naruto's eyes widened as he fell to the ground and began hacking up blood. "Then do the jutsu already!" Naruto gasped. The Shinigami sighed, before leaning down and extending his hand to Naruto. "Fine, take my hand and say please." Naruto looked at him as if he were crazy. "It's not as if you've got much choice in the matter." Tick-tock, tick-tock. Naruto swung his hand round to take a hold of death himself. "Please." With a surge, he felt all the power that he had held leave him, traveling along his hand and up to the Shinigami. Immediately, the world started going hazy. Just before he blacked out, he heard the Shinigami's voice one last time. "Oh, and for future reference, you're really going to want to kill that son of a bitch Yakushi Kabuto, or he'll really start to chafe your ass in the future." It seemed as if Naruto had awoken from a dream, or was it a nightmare? Slowly, he opened his eyes, staring at the familiar ceiling above his head. He was back in his home, back in his own apartment block. With a whoop he kicked off the covers and ran around, or tried to. The only thing he succeeded in doing was planting himself face first into the ground. Frowning, he stood up slowly and tried to take a couple of steps forward, swearing as he tripped up once again. It looked like that technique had messed up with the control he had over his own body. It took a while, but Naruto finally made it into the bathroom. He stopped suddenly, staring at his cracked mirror. Staring at the face of the 10-year-old boy looking out at him. He did it, the little kid actually did it. Well, of course he did. I never had any doubt of it in my mind, another voice said, answering the fox's disbelieving statement. Chapter 5. A New Comrade. Naruto froze at the sound of the voice that spoke within his head. "Who's that?" he asked warily. "It seems kitas if we have picked up a stoye on our trip," the Kyuubi answered, a hint of disgust evident in his voice. "Hello again, Naruto. I hope you don't mind me joining you on this little adventure." Naruto stopped, his eyes widening to alarming levels. "This can't be happening to me," he muttered, trying to keep his sanity. "I'm going to close my eyes and count to 10, and when I've finished counting, this will all have been a horrible nightmare. 1. Well, that's not very nice. 2. Is he always like this? 3. Pretty much. The kid spends most of his life in denial, mostly when he's fighting. He always the fact that it should be impossible for him to win, and then usually kicks the crap out of the guy. Of course, he couldn't do it without me." For, by now, Naruto's voice had gone a little higher as he started to quiver. "I don't know, looking at it from my view, he didn't use your help all that much." 5. Naruto had started to get a little louder. Silence greeted him. 6. He doesn't really think that this is going to work, does he? 7, 8, 9, 10. Naruto opened his eyes and looked around. The voices had stopped. With a sigh of relief, he picked himself off the floor and tried to walk towards the kitchen, cursing as he fell over once more. Finally reaching the kitchen, he managed to flick the kettle on without incident, before dragging himself over to the pantry and pulled out one of his many packs of instant ramen. However, his muscle control was still shot, so it took a while to clean up all the other bowls of instant ramen that had come crashing down to the ground when Naruto upset their somewhat precarious balance. All in all, he had tried to stack them back in the cupboard 6 times, before he gave up. Instead, he philosophically took it as a sign that the 7 remaining bowls of ramen were meant to be eaten as well. The kettle had boiled by now, so, using one hand to steady the cup, Naruto added the hot water. Or tried to. Aergrug! Naruto screamed, hopping around in pain as he held his scalded hand, bashing into numerous objects, corners and edges before he tripped over his own feet and fell onto the ground. Why does this shit keep happening to me? Naruto wailed. Because sending you back in time resulted in you having the mind of a 16-year-old and the body of a 12-year-old boy. To be frank, you're trying to move as if you were still as big as your 16-year-old self, when in fact, you're stuck in your titch of a 12-year-old body. I'm not a titch. You're 12 years old and under 4 feet 8. Face it, you're a midget. I'm not a what the hell are you doing here anyway? Naruto asked, inwardly cursing Kakashi-sensei, who had told him that the counting to 10 always helped with sorting out your problems. Or was it 10,000? That might explain a couple of things about his punctuality. A sigh came from within Naruto's mind as the Shinigami answered him. Hiding. Eh? You're the god of the dead, who could you be hiding from? Naruto asked out loud, his face scrunched up in disbelief. Kami. Hearing this, Naruto closed his eyes and entered the familiar area of his mindscape. What do you mean, Kami? Why would you hide from him? Naruto asked, the curiosity evident in his voice. I myself am curious about that. As far as I know, you two are almost equal in power, Kyuubi said, trying to poke his muzzle between the bars of the cage. The Shinigami stood in the middle of the sewer, once more in his human form. Sighing, he sat down on the cushy armchair that appeared behind him. Naruto twitched as he did this, finding the thought of the death god messing around with his head to be slightly invasive. Look, technically you're right. When it comes to raw power, Kami and I are pretty much equal, but his rather unique position puts him firmly above me in the food chain. Because he's king of the gods? Kyuubi asked. The raspberry in reply showed Shinigami's lack of respect for figures of authority. Naruto thought that he just might like the guy. That has got nothing to do with it. Fact of the matter is he happens to be my father-in-law. Kyuubi blinked. I don't get it, Naruto said, who had never really had to experience an overprotective father. Thinking of Hayashi, both Kyuubi and Shinigami spoke as one. You will. Naruto just sighed. While this is all very interesting, it still doesn't explain what you're doing here. The Shinigami put his hand behind his neck and rubbed it in a very Naruto-ish fashion. Well, you see, Kami-sen was more than a little upset that I used so much godly power to turn back time, something about the technique being forbidden because of destabilizing the fabric of the multiverse. Apparently, we were incredibly lucky that the thing worked. Wait, Naruto said. You said that Kami was upset that you used so much godly power to turn back time. You told me that the technique needed chakra to work. The Shinigami shrugged. I lied. Turning back the eons is a power that should belong to no mortal being. Kyuubi here could do it by himself if he really had to and if he could grab enough power. It just takes a lot more effort for a demon to do the deed than it does for a god. Then tell me, what happened to all of our power? Oh, it's being put to good use, Shinigami said, a dreamy look on his face. In the court of the underworld. Gamikun, Arlia crooned. Where are ya? You promised that we would spend the day together. Arlia burst into her husband's office, where she spied him sitting behind a massive pile of paperwork that extended into the air beyond easy sight, and yet somehow remained perfectly balanced. Gamikun, Arlia shrieked, diving over the desk and tackling her husband to the ground. He immediately exploded in a poof of smoke, leaving his wife to fall unceremoniously to the floor. She lay there, shocked, for a period of 5 seconds before another shadow clone poofed into existence. Arlia stood up, her eyes narrowing. There will be a reckoning, she said quietly, dangerously, before kicking the clone between the legs, forcing it to dispel. Naruto's room. Shinigami winced, then paled at the memory that came to him. Oh shit. Anyway, there's a loophole in the rulebook that means that I am able to match any power you give me with my own to use the technique. So I had enough power to send me back by almost 5 years? Naruto asked, the delight evident in his voice. Hell no. Shinigami looked at Naruto's slightly crestfallen face and smirked. You gave me too much power, enough to send you back to a time before you were born. Naruto's eyes widened. Then why did you only send me back 5 years? The Shinigami shrugged. Although it doesn't seem like it to you, it actually takes quite a while to perform the technique, and I was interrupted when I was halfway through. Besides, you only really need to start changing some stuff when you become a genin, although, it might be better if you had a better foundation of techniques to go with. You know, you still haven't explained why you're hiding in my head. I'm not. I'm hiding in your seal. Since I helped your dad make it, it's one of the few places that I can stay without being detected. Plus, I find myself in the annoying position of being in your debt. What? QB sighed. Sometime his host was a little bit clueless. Think, Kit. You gave him power. He had to perform a task using the same amount of power. He did not, since he was interrupted, probably by Kami. Yeah, let's go with that, Shinami thought. Thinking back to that rather interesting memory that involved his wife and shaking his head, he turned back to what QB was saying. And so, he needs to repay you what he owes you. After all, it won't do to have a god indebted to a mortal. Oh, a slow grin began spreading across Naruto's face. Shinami's sweat dropped. He didn't like the look of that grin. So basically, I've got the god of death as my own personal slave for the foreseeable future? Naruto asked, the glee evident in his voice. As soon as the words left his mouth, he fell to the ground as the massive killing intent hit him. No, not killing intent, this was something more. The Shinami just stood there, as the light seemed to flee from all around him, leaving him a pitch-black area, and yet, he was not hidden by the darkness. Darkness itself seemed to be hidden by him. The light that always seemed to illuminate Naruto's mindscape shifted. The man's eyes changed, becoming a complete, milky white with pinpricks of a scarlet red in the center. Then the cold came, not an ice cold, but the cold of a graveyard mist. The cold could be seen, shimmering lightly in the air, as it moved toward Naruto, whose muscles all seemed to have frozen, all save his heart, which was pounding rapidly. The cold settled over Naruto, and he began feeling it sink into his skin. A tingling non-feeling glittered over his fingers and scalp, before the cold began sinking deeper. The warm blood in his veins tried to push that cold away, but there was pain where that cold energy met the blood pulsing beneath his skin. The warmth failed him and Naruto fell to the floor, gasping for breath. The numbness spread throughout Naruto's body as the cold started running through his veins, heading for his heart. But it was not just cold. This cold head was empty as the night sky devoid of stars, heartless and above all, hungry. This hunger clawed at him, not just his body, but him. Naruto could almost feel his mind, his ambitions, his very dreams being slowly smothered by that frozen, mindless hunger, as the cold started to slow his heart, making breathing impossible. And then it left him. Naruto lay on the ground, curled into the fetal position as he gasped frantically for breath, trying to ignore the lingering void-like presence that the cold had left within him. His heartbeat had sped up again, to almost deadly levels. All of a sudden, a fiery warmth came to him running throughout his veins, cleansing the last of the taint that had been left within him and slowing his heart, stopping from bursting. Never had Naruto been gladder to feel the familiar liquid fire of demon chakra running through him. Silently, he thanked Kyuubi as he slowly sat up and opened his eyes, only to push himself backwards when faced with the visage of the Shinigami only a few inches away from him. There was no trace of joviality in his tone anymore as he spoke. Remember your place, mortal. I have taken an interest in you and am, as your demon friend said, in your debt. But if you ever treat me with such disrespect as to make me out to be your slave again, then I will erase your very existence. It will be as if you were never born. No one will know you. No one will remember you, and you will be cursed to wander through the lives of your friends, seeing them, seeing all the pain and suffering that they go through when you could have been there to help them. You will watch them die time and time again, and you will never meet them, for they will never even acknowledge your existence. Your loneliness shall utterly consume you, and it shall last for 1,000 years. Silence reigned after the Shinigami had finished his speech. A minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. Finally, Naruto swallowed and bowed towards the Shinigami, touching his face to the ground. I apologize, Shinigami-sama. I have a habit of acting before I think. It won't happen again. I promise. Shinigami just stared at him for a bit longer, before finally bowing his head, accepting the apology. As long as it doesn't happen again, we'll get along just fine. How was it that you intended to pay back your debt? Kyuubi asked. It seems to me that there is much yet to be paid. First of all, I don't owe you anything, so don't try and infer that I do. Secondly, I thought that I'd stay here and give the boy a bit of a hand in his training and mental development. Oi. Besides that, I also happen to have some knowledge about what will be happening in his world at the time after the time when he was originally sent back that could prove to be invaluable to him in the long run. That and a couple of other tricks mean that I should be able to pay back any debt that I owe. That still leaves you in his debt. Oh? Kyuubi smirked at the Shinigami. As an immortal, he and the death god did not often see eye to eye and had met each other many times over the eons. It generally led to them trying to one-up one another, which provided a sort of entertainment that neither of them were often able to enjoy. You're hiding from Kami and the kid's seal. You never asked for permission and are also effectively invading his mind, something that goes against more laws than I care to count. Damn. You're right, the Shinigami cursed slightly, thinking that the fox had got one over him. Then he smiled. Too good at that game. Naruto, I have a proposition for you. Okay, Naruto was still feeling a little bit wary of the death god. After all, he had just been reminded, rather rudely, that he was, in fact, dealing with the death god as in the guy who was Lord of the Dead and could introduce him to the rest of his subjects within a heartbeat. I need a place to hide, stay, and although this seal will do nicely, it just doesn't quite meet up to my usual standards. So, with your permission, I'd like to improve it. What do you mean? Well, the changes to the seal would give me a bit more room to move around in, but it would also have a couple of side effects. Such as? First of all, when the seal was first created, your dad and I were a little pressed for time, so I'll be making a couple of adjustments that we had originally intended to make. Huh? Shinigami sighed. Think about it, thanks to their demons, most of the Jinchuriki get some fairly decent abilities. Gaara got control over sand, the Nibi's Jinchuriki got control over fire, the Sanbai got illusionary mist, the Yambi got lava, the Gobi got steam. Need I go on? The point of the matter is, we weren't able to give you a secondary ability. Not true. What about my healing factor? Naruto asked, slightly annoyed at the fact that the Shinigami was insulting his dad's sealing work. The Shinigami just snorted. Please, that thing? You don't know much about your clan, so I'll forgive you. Fact of the matter is that the entire Uzumaki clan has a rather impressive healing factor, your bloodline limit. It's the reason why the Uzumaki are so long-lived. One of the more impressive examples of this bloodline would have to be Mito Uzumaki, the first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. She lived since before the founding of Konoha well into the third Hokage's reign, and that's with Kyuubi over there burning up her life expectancy with his demon chakra. Then there's your own mother, Kushina Uzumaki. She survived the extraction of Kyuubi, after she had just given birth, and a rough birth at that. How? Because of the resilience and healing of the Uzumakis. You've got it as well, otherwise how did you think you recovered from all those scratches and such that Kiba gave you when Orochimaru had sealed Kyuubi with the 5-pronged seal? Now, I can't give you any secondary abilities at this late stage. I'd have to remake the entire seal to do so. But I can increase that healing factor of yours and maybe give you a couple of other tweaks. Tweaks? Naruto said, feeling slightly suspicious. Shinigami nodded. Yes, tweaks, but it will take me a while to do everything. To do it all at once would overload your system, causing you to explode, sending blood and guts everywhere and putting a terrible stain in the carpet. There is a small possibility that this will happen anyway. Oh well, let's get started, the Shinigami finished brightly. I forbid it. Kyuubi roared, knowing that whatever Shinigami did now would not be good for him. Wad-dash, Naruto fell to the ground, unconscious. Oh yes, the force is strong with this one. Eh? You wouldn't get it. Different dimension. The Shinigami had not been working for long before he started muttering to himself. The mutterings grew louder and louder before finally, he turned to Kyuubi. What the fuck did you do? He roared. The Kyuubi quailed for a moment, then stood tall once more. I tried to get out. I tried to gain my freedom. You nearly got the both of you killed, dumbass. He looked guiltily at the unconscious form of the boy. Mind you, it does explain a couple of things. Like what? Your actions in trying to free yourself from the seal put a shitload of cracks through the filter of the seal. Your own raw demon chakra has been leaking into the poor boy's body at an almost constant, dangerous rate. And where is most of the chakra centered? That's right, the brain. No wonder the poor punk often acts so idiotic. The mental growth to his brain has been stunted and his libido is way out of whack. No wonder he never noticed that girl in the first place. You've also stunted his growth. No wonder he used to be such a short ass. The only thing that I'm surprised about is that he didn't actually die from all of this. So what do you plan on doing? I'm going to fix the seal. He'll be a bit smarter and will be able to grow a bit more, not to mention that he'll actually start noticing girls instead of just searching for the attention that they give him. I don't really need to do anything to improve his healing factor. It works like a muscle, the more work you do with it, the stronger it gets. And it's been fighting against your chakra for most of his life. But I did promise to improve it, so it's going to be in everyone's faces. Heck, the kid might even be able to regenerate limbs if they get removed. But having a look at it now, there may be one thing that I can do to improve his natural abilities. It took a surprisingly short amount of time for Shinigami to finish making the improvements to Naruto's seal. As soon as he was done, there was an instant change to the mindscape. Or, at least half of the mindscape. The half beyond Kyuubi's cage had become what looked like a large rec room, complete with a TV, game system, pool table and a luxurious bed in the corner. There was also what looked like the floor of a massive dojo in the middle of the room. No longer did it look like the inside of a sewer. Kyuubi's side stayed the same. Alright, time for the boy to wake up. Naruto's room. Slowly, Naruto sat back up from where he had collapsed onto the floor, his body covered in a cold sweat. Erg. My head, what did you to me? A great favor. But it wasn't enough. I should have made sure that the fox wasn't able to damage your seal. So will you accept my offer of help? Naruto blinked. He still wasn't completely sure about having another voice in his head. But at the same time he didn't want to piss this guy off. I'd be honored, but don't you have a job to do? Shinigami snorted. Kid, remember when I told you that I've been taking on heroes and the like for thousands of years? You're the most interesting one that I've yet to come across, and lately I've been bored as hell. Besides, I've been working since pretty much the dawn of creation. Trust me, kid. I'm due some long service leave. Chapter 6. Small Changes. The blonde knucklehead was cursing fluently with a great amount of feeling as he walked down the streets of Konoha towards the academy. Well, if you could call it walking. His steps seemed to somehow be a little bit off. Instead of his usual, hyperactive and slightly cocky stride, he was stumbling and weaving like Tsunade going back home on one of the rare occasions when Shizen called in sick. Now, you might expect Shizen to never have a sick day, what with her mentor being the greatest healer within all of the elemental lands, but Tsunade had her reasons for making sure that her apprentice got her bed rest. Reasons that Naruto understood perfectly. It was quite simple, really. With Shizen out of the way, there was no one, or at least, no one who dared to place more paperwork on the Hokage's desk. There was no one to make her go through all those boring reports, and most importantly, there was no one to steal her hidden stashes of sake, or prevent her from going out at the end of the day for a small drink. Which meant that a sick day for Shizen meant a day off for Tsunade. Hence her less than completely stable state on her return home in the evening. But this was not the reason as to why Naruto was so upset. Or at least, it was not the whole reason. The real reason for his less than cheerful disposition was simply because he stank. That wasn't usually a problem for him. After all, running around 24/7 in a thick orange jumpsuit in the middle of the land of fire meant that he would often get a little bit whiffy, but this was so much more than he usually had to deal with. Landing headfirst in a dumpster could often have such an effect. Naruto had just never thought that he would have to find out this little fact firsthand. Grimacing slightly, Naruto increased the amount of chakra he was sending to his nose to block out the smell as he thought back to what had caused this dilemma. He had been in a bit of a rush to get to the academy. He just couldn't wait to see everyone, especially Sasuke and Hinata. It hadn't taken him very long at all to realize that Orochimaru had never come into contact with Sasuke yet, and that if he played his cards right, he would make sure that he wouldn't lose his brother to that snake again. And that really was a promise of a lifetime. He was also desperate to see Hinata living and breathing again. Plus, well, class had already started a couple of minutes ago. Never mind. He'd just go out through the window and do some roof hopping. That'd save time. Flashback. Ayagug. Naruto winced. It hadn't saved time. After a small conversation with Shinigami, he found out the reason for his lack of body control. It turns out that instead of just merging his 10-year-old mind with the rest of his memories, he had sent over his entire 16-year-old mind to the past. Apparently, having a much larger 16-year-old's mind in the body of a 10-year-old shrimp, his words, not Naruto's, played havoc with a person's muscle control. Of course, if he had actually bothered to listen to what Shinigami had said to him, then he would never have been in this position in the first place. But since when had Naruto ever learned something after just being told about it? He learned by doing stuff with his body. Falling from several stories high into a dumpster qualifies. After this, Naruto conveniently forgot just how powerful the being inside of him really was for the express purpose of being able to swear off at the old dude. Not that he really minded, since he was too busy laughing at Naruto trying to dig himself out of the dumpster. The impact had left a fairly large crater. But there were some future benefits of his situation. Turns out that if the Shinigami hadn't done things this way, then Naruto would have been unable to use the Kage Bunshin training technique. Apparently, if his 10-year-old's mind had to go through the trauma of so many hours' worth of memories and experiences all being dumped on it at once, Naruto's brain would do the same thing as Ino's when she was forced to keep her mouth shut about some particularly juicy piece of gossip: explode. All of this lead him to this moment in time, walking, well, lurching, down the familiar road, wearing one of his old orange outfits. He had 4 different sets of them, unlike some of those rumors that went around Konoha. He did have some semblance of personal hygiene. Admittedly, a rather small one. It was a good thing that he had so many sets as, well, this one would probably have to go, since it was covered in all manner of refuse. Sniffing with his dulled nose, Naruto tried to identify at least some of the smells that clung to him: old milk, fungus-laden bread, 6 different kinds of rotting fruit, with bits of old noodles, rice, beef and pork, although strangely enough, no chicken. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was sniff, sniff. Naruto blanched. Yep, diaper gravy, Shinigami said, a slight giggle in his voice. Naruto swore. Kami, what did I do to deserve this? Rewrote the fabric of time itself? Shut up, Baka Fox. I wasn't asking you. As he spoke, Naruto walked past the Inuzuka compound. All of a sudden, A series of panicked howls and yelps rent the air as the sensitive noses of the Inuzuka hounds, and indeed those of the Inuzukas themselves, were assaulted by potent smell of the stench that hung around Naruto like a malevolent miasma. "Oh, come on!" Naruto shouted out loud, the annoyance in his voice evident. "It's not that bad." Catching a sight of the dogs through a hole in the fence, Naruto's sweat dropped. The dogs were by now trying to bury their faces in the dirt. Evidently, they thought that yes, it really was that bad. As Naruto walked down the path, he reflected that this wasn't really all that bad. One good thing going for him was that the people around him weren't giving him those customary hate-filled glances. If they had, then they would have been spending too long in his presence. The crowd parted before him, leaving an open path down the road. Naruto smirked. One day they would do that once more, but this time, out of respect for their leader. Eventually, Naruto came to a very familiar arched bridge. A short wave of nostalgia came over him at the sight of it. This particular bridge was the place where he and his team used to meet for missions. Well, after he, Sasuke and Sakura waited a couple of hours for Kakashi. Or where they would wait. Naruto shook his head. Time travel was confusing. Deciding to leave that subject alone for the moment, Naruto stopped a while. Walking over to the railing, he placed his hands on it and stared out at the plants and flowers that surrounded him. Leaves and flower petals from a nearby sakura tree blew past him, accenting the beauty of the surrounding scene, before falling to kiss the surface of the water beneath him, where the gentle currents slowly carried them away. The sight before him was so beautiful, so serene, that it began to have a relaxing effect on Naruto. All the stress, all the tension that had been with him ever since he first learned of Jiraiya's untimely demise slowly started to drain out of him. Smiling slightly, Naruto took a deep breath to take in the air and smell of this place, which was the site of so many memories, absent-mindedly halting the flow of chakra to his nose as he did so. There were not many who were watching Naruto at this point of time, however, those that were simply could not understand the demon brat. He had just been standing there, hands placed on the railing of the bridge, looking out over the river with a smile on his face. This smile was different to the one that he usually wore. It was small, slight, and yet it lit up his face in a way that hardly anyone ever saw. When he smiled this smile, his sapphire eyes seemed to come alive, twinkling like the jewels they so closely resembled and yet alight with a joy and mischievousness that made them seem to be somehow more. Many almost didn't recognize him, even despite the fact that he was the only one in Konoha to wear a jumpsuit that particularly unique color. And all because of a different smile. Hinata had a name for this expression. She called it his true smile, a smile that was made with not just his mouth, but also with his eyes, those eyes that usually held such pain. Still smiling, Naruto had suddenly taken a deep breath through his nose. Everything changed. The smile left him. A look of horror took a firm hold on his features, as the color of his complexion became a match to Gama-chan's. Then, with all the eagerness of a lemming, Naruto hurled himself over the railing and into the water below, creating a loud splash from his less than graceful entry. One of the nearby civilians brightened considerably. Obviously, the demon felt guilty for its past actions, or, more likely, felt that life was no longer worth living in highest current, pathetic form. Grinning stupidly, he went off to spread the good news, the more than slight weave in his stride indicating that he and Tsunade had something in common. Either that or there was another time traveler in Konoha. Naruto sat at the bottom of the river, scrubbing furiously at his nose, his newly sensitive nose. Shinigami had said that he would increase his senses, and the death god had kept his word. Naruto's sense of smell had been greatly increased. It still wasn't on par with an Inuzuka's, since Shinigami had made sure to make any of the changes gradual, but it had still been increased by a large factor. Before now, he had been channeling chakra to his eyes, ears and nose in order to compensate for his newly developed sensitivity. But by accidentally releasing that chakra, he placed his virtually virgin nose under the torture of his own stench. This situation was comparable to a man who has been blindfolded for a number of years suddenly having his blindfold ripped off, only to be confronted by a flash bomb that wouldn't end. And so, Naruto had done the only thing that he could think of. Which brought him back to the present time, sitting at the bottom of the river. It made sense when you think about it. You can't smell underwater. Well, you really messed that now, didn't you? You haven't even had my improvements for 2 hours and already you're making a fool of yourself. I think I'm gonna be sick. You do realize, of course, that you've probably done some damage to yourself after that little stunt? What do you mean? Shinigami sighed. To put it in terms that your simple mind can understand, you've gone and overloaded your nose. Thanks to your healing factor, you'll be able to use it to its full potential in a couple of days. Mind you, that's not really a bad thing. Out of all your senses, the change in your sense of smell will take the greatest amount of getting used to. Ah well, this may be for the best, I suppose. Now back to the surface with you. No. No? It might be waiting for me, Naruto explained. You do realize that you can't breath down here? Can't breath up there either, Naruto grumbled, allowing himself to float back up to the flight. He broke the surface of the water with the tips of his hair first, and then allowed his eyes to rise above the water, keeping his nose submerged. Get on with it. Being sure to virtually stuff his nose with chakra, just in case, Naruto let the rest of his head rise above the water and tried to lever himself up by channeling chakra to his hands and pushing up. Keyword tried. His hand went straight through the water, acting as if there were no chakra there at all. Frowning, Naruto tried again. And again. And again. Hey dumbass, it ain't gonna work. You've only got the chakra control of your 11-year-old self, remember? Actually, it's even worse than it used to be. Why me? Why not? Shut up. So, is worse chakra control something else that I didn't read in the fine print in the legal document of the consequences of time travel? Complete silence greeted Naruto at these words. It lasted long enough for Naruto to reach the river's bank. It was beginning to make him a bit fidgety. What? He asked abruptly. Kit, that sounded almost intelligent. Screw you. Anyway, no, the low chakra control is not an effect of time travel, but rather an effect of me tweaking your seal. Used to be that raw yokai chakra was leaking into your system. That did help for your control, but you usually had a rather large amount of chakra used to power your healing factor to combat the damage done to your system by it. This is one of the things that ended up making your chakra coils so kami-forsaken huge. It's also what made you such a short ass. Only reason that you ended up getting a growing spurt is that you ended up developing a strong resistance to the demon chakra. Plus your Erosenin actually got you on a decent diet. Seriously, what do you see in eating all that ramen? That much of the stuff just can't be healthy. Shinigami stopped as a feral growl rent the air and Naruto appeared in his mindscape. Pointing an accusing finger at the death god, he growled, "Don't mess with the ramen, dude. That's sacred territory you're walking. Either you respect the ramen, or Shinigami, or not. I swear by the log that I will kick your ass." Shinigami's sweat dropped. Anyway, thing is, that the demon chakra didn't leak at a constant rate. The seal acted as a self-repairing dam, I guess you could say. The demon chakra would build up until it overflowed, sending a large amount of Kyuubi's essence into your system, although not nearly as much as when you consciously draw upon his chakra yourself. This in turn meant that a large amount of your chakra was used to combat it. All this was highly inefficient, and the fluctuations in your chakra caused your control to go to hell. I just changed the seal so that it would allow the chakra to constantly leak into your system. What? Are you crazy? The last thing I need is having demon chakra in me all the time. Why couldn't you, Ao? Naruto suddenly sat on the ground, rubbing the large bump on his head. The Shinigami rubbed his fist with an expression of slightly sadistic smile pleasure on his face. Wasn't sure if I'd actually be able to touch you in here. This'll make things so much more interesting. Naruto paled as the smile on the death god's face began to widen into a shit-eating grin. Alright, now if you will allow me to continue, let me explain why I did it this way. Think of it like this. What's easier to move, a 2-ton boulder or 2 tons worth of 10-kilogram rocks? The 2-ton boulder. Shinigami face vaulted. Right, let me rephrase that. Which would be easier for a civilian to accomplish? The rocks. Right. So, what's as simple? As each drop of demon chakra enters your system, it is quickly converted and assimilated within your own chakra coils. This frees up a lot of the chakra that used to go to heal the damage done. My way of doing things means that you're going to get more demon chakra into your system every day with almost no damage done, and with more yokai chakra in your system your resistance is going to increase as well. It eliminates the fluctuations in your chakra, which means it's possible to get some fairly decent control. Basically, you're going to get a larger chakra capacity, higher control, a better resistance to demon chakra, and all with a crapload less damage to you than it used to be. And all with just one change to the seal. Naruto stared at the Shinigami with something approaching awe on his face. You're a genius. Why, yes, I am. Feel free to bask in my glow. It wasn't much longer after that Naruto entered a shop, with a henge of himself looking like he did when he was before the time jump, except with black hair, no whiskers and green eyes. He still stank. Flashback. Naruto looked down and caught sight of his reflection in the water. He looked a real mess. Damn. I can't go to the academy like this. Why not? I look like a mess. So? He doesn't want the blue-haired, pale-eyed girl to see him like this. And no, that's not it. Kit, how long have I known you? Is that a trick question? Give me some credit. I know you well enough to know what you're thinking almost before you do, unless you're about to do something that completely defies all logical reasoning. So you can effectively read his mind about half the time? A little less than half the time, actually. I gotta go home and change. Do that, and you might as well not go to the academy at all today. Get to the nearest and get some new clothes. Then burn these ones. You're not going to tell me that you have something against orange as well, are you? Naruto asked suspiciously. Shinigami sighed, somehow knowing that it wouldn't be the last time. No, nothing against orange. Just thought that you'd like to get rid of that smell. Oh, alright then. Now, let's go shopping. Naruto, about to bolt in the direction of the closest store, stopped and shuddered. Shinigami-sama? Yes? Next time I say something that sounds so much like Ino, kick me. Please? I was already planning on it. Thank you. Problem sorted, Naruto charged off, only to trip and to slide about 4 meters across the gravel on his face. Wincing, he sat up, feeling the cuts on his face close up, healing at a remarkable rate. But he also became aware of something. Even he did heal faster than he used to, that didn't mean that it didn't hurt. Alright, enough is enough. Henge. Transforming into his 16-year-old self, Naruto ran to the store with all the grace of a ninja. He had changed his appearance after Shinigami had pointed out that he was the only one to have those rather distinctive whisker marks, and people would begin to wonder why he was walking around in a henge, not to mention the questions he would be asked if people found out that he knew exactly how he would look when older. Apparently, that sort of thing makes one suspicious. Unfortunately, they didn't have any orange jumpsuits, so Naruto had to go with something different. Tell you what, kid, you're going to need some clothes that don't stand out so much, so why don't you let me choose them for you? If you do, I may even tell you about the secondary ability you've got. In the end, Gamachan was completely empty. Naruto now wore a pair of form-fitting, yet not tight, black pair of cotton pants. His gray shirt was long-sleeved and fairly tight, over which he wore a black hoodie. Leather boots adorned his feet. The black clothes were all faded in color, not a pitch black. Rather, they were a color that Shinigami said would allow him to blend in with the shadows of the night. The god of death seemed to have a thing for black. Who knew? Despite all this though, the Shinigami wouldn't tell him what his ability was until he had completed the outfit. He needed more cash to get the matching matte black chainmail shirt, vambraces and greaves before he could get his second resident to spill the beans. His last purchase was a bottle of deodorant. He was a little disappointed with the smell though. However, both the Shinigami and Kyuubi had forbid him from buying that one. Flashback. Hey! This one smells like ramen. And oh, shocked at both the tone of voice and the fact that the two immortals had actually agreed on something, Naruto put the bottle down and picked a new one at random. Besides covering up the remainder of the smell, Naruto found out that the deodorant highly effective in getting rid of the source of the unholy odor. Kyuubi directed him to hold a lit match or a lighter in front of the can and then spray. Naruto was a little shocked at first at the spurt of flame that came out, and was careful to make sure that he kept control over it. But his now dry jumpsuit was soon crackling away merely in a small metal rubbish bin. How Kyuubi knew of this trick was a mystery he wasn't telling, although Naruto did hear him mutter something under his breath about a troublesome woman. Naruto stood outside the door to his class, just staring at the doorknob. He had been standing there for the last 2 minutes. Why? He was scared. 5 years he had gone back in time. And it was only now starting to come to him what that could actually mean. He knew what was going to happen. He could change what would happen. But with every change he made, the future that he knew of would also change. As of now, he had only 3 main goals. Prevent Jiraiya's death. Stop Sasuke from abandoning the Konoha. Save Hinata-chan's life. That was not necessarily the order of their importance. Taking a deep breath, Naruto entered the room. Iruka halted the lecture as a short figure dressed in black walked into the room. If you could call it walking, as the figure stumbled all over the place. Can I help you? Stopping, the boy looked at him in confusion from beneath the shadows of his hood, but seeing his face, Iruka recognized the whisker marks on his cheeks. The shock of blonde hair when he pulled the hood down confirmed his suspicion. Hey Iruka-sensei! Naruto, do you have any idea what time it is? Iruka yelled, using the big head jutsu on him. Naruto clapped his hands over his ears. He still wasn't used to how much louder even the smallest of things sounded to him. At Shinigami's urging, he had decreased the amount of chakra that blocked each of his senses in an attempt to get used to them, but he could do without all the shouting. Please. Not so loud, he muttered. Iruka glared at his student. He didn't like telling Naruto off, but still. Well, Naruto. Would you like to tell the class why you are a total of 5 hours late today? Sorry about that, Iruka-sensei. As to why I'm late, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Naruto. Fumbling for an excuse, Naruto went with an old standby. I ran into this poor old lady carrying some groceries and had to help her get them home, after which I got lost on the road of life? Liar. Naruto's sweat dropped. Did that excuse have a universal reaction? At least the distraction had given Haim the chance to come up with something that sounded plausible. Fine. I spent too much money on the sulfur and not enough on the fuse. Happy? What? Naruto winced once more. I also think I may have blown an eardrum. Irika just sighed. Get to a seat, Naruto. Swallowing, Naruto turned to face the rest of the class. His gaze immediately went to the girl in the back row. It was all that Naruto could do to prevent the tears coming to his eyes as he stared straight at those lavender pools and stared walking towards the back of the class, uncaring of the tables he bumped into along the way. Hinata hadn't been having a good day. Her father had been his usual cheerful self at the breakfast table, praising Hanabi for all of her accomplishments, while at the same time degrading Hinata with every word. Then Niji had been waiting outside for her and went on another fate trip, stating how she was fated to be a failure for the entirety of her life, how it would have been better if she had never been born and that she should leave. That she was unloved and would always remain unloved, for no one would accept someone as pathetic as her. She had run from the Hyuga Manor in tears. And when she finally got to the academy, he wasn't there to cheer her up. Naruto could always do that. No matter what had happened to her, somehow just being in the same room as her crush took away the heaviness that too often burdened her heart. But he hadn't been there. She had sat, alone, during recess, watching all the other kids play together, the ones who had friends. No one had tried to include her, and during the few times that she had been able to pluck up the courage to try and join a group, there would always be someone who would say something that would kill the meager confidence she had. She had spent most of lunch hiding in a corner, crying. No friends, her mother dead, her once kind uncle dead because of her, an unloving father, a disdainful sister, and a hating cousin. Alone and unloved, was that her fate? No. She would not let her cousin get to her. Her family may not love her, but Kurenai-san loved her. She would not give up on herself. Naruto-kun never gave up, no matter how many times he fell. And so, when the bell went, she washed her face, dried her eyes and gone back to the classroom, with nobody the wiser. And then he had walked into the classroom. Hinata took a deep breath and released it, feeling much of the tension that she had been holding on to flow out from her body, smiling a little as she heard the conversation between Naruto and Irika-sensei. When she opened her eyes, she was greeted by a shock. Naruto was looking at her. At her. Hinata watched wide-eyed as he came towards her, his bright blue eyes never leaving her face. Naruto smiled at Hinata as he stood beside the free seat next to her. Hey Hinata, he said quietly. Do you mind if I sit here? Blushing a bright red, Hinata shook her head. Th, that's fine, Naruto-kun. I'd be happy for you to sit next to me. He smiled a true smile at her, causing her to go a shade of red that Naruto had only ever seen on her face before, and took his seat. Don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, Hinata silently chanted. Slowly, her face returned to a mere pink in color. Hinata took several deep breaths to center herself, before inadvertently taking notice of Naruto's scent. Ramen, sandalwood, slightly smoky with a hint of cinnamon. Catching her thoughts, Hinata went straight back to a red color. Don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint. She had yet to get herself under control when the object of her affection leaned close to her and held her hand. I'm really happy to see you today, Hinata-chan, he said. Hinata stared at Naruto. He called me Chan. He's holding my hand. Hinata fainted. Naruto chuckled. He was so glad that his friend was still alive. Smiling happily, he looked around at his surrounding classmates, ignoring the cannon fodder. Sasuke had made the mistake of sitting in the middle of a desk, so Sakura and Ino were sitting on either side of him, fighting for him over his head. Choji was munching on a pack of chips, as usual, while Shikamaru was asleep on his desk, also as usual. Kiba was looking bored while talking to Akamaru, and Shino was, well, Shino. He turned back to look at Irika-sensei with a smile still on his face. Naruto. What happened to Hinata? Naruto put a worried look on his face. I don't know, Irika-sensei. I just talked to her, and she went all red then keeled over. Do you think she may be sick? Irika sighed and went back to the lesson. Never mind. Today, we are going to start the henge. Naruto paled as he realized the one thing that he had never thought to take into account in going back in time. He would have to go through at another 2 years of academy schoolwork shit. He turned back to Irika. The henge is a rather weak transformation genjutsu that acts to change one's appearance. It has no physical effect on the body whatsoever? Any questions? Irika was slightly shocked as Naruto's hand shot into the air. Yes, Naruto? Irika-sensei, does that mean that if you use the henge to make yourself taller or bigger, then you'd actually still be the same size? That's what I just said, Naruto. The henge is an E-rank genjutsu. What you're talking about is what is known as a true transformation. It would involve redistributing and actually increasing your body mass with chakra alone. The only ones capable of doing anything like that are the Akimichis. But even they can't change their appearance at the same time. A technique like that would be at the very least an A-rank ninjutsu. Naruto's mind blanked out as he remembered transforming into his 16-year-old self and running with perfect control, the fight with pain as he transformed his clones into rubble that hit the ground from a high height and didn't disperse, and finally, when he had Sasuke throw him as a transformed windmill shuriken. He did think he could. He threw back his head and laughed. Chapter 7. Henge and a Small Misunderstanding. Naruto just couldn't stop laughing. The situation itself was entirely hilarious. He had, as an academy student of 11 years old, developed a supposedly impossible A-rank technique. He had then proceeded to use that technique for 5 years while being completely unaware of what he was actually doing. But what made it really funny were the reasons as to why he had actually messed around with the henge in the first place. The Oryoke no Jutsu, and I'm not going to translate that. You should know it. He had just been looking for a way to make it more realistic. Sigh, it really is the ultimate technique. Plus, when he had first tried to do the genjutsu, he could never get it right. Iruka had kept on saying that he was using too much chakra. But his henge had always used a fair amount of chakra. Oh, there was so much that he could do with this. Just imagine the pranks he could get away. As this thought crossed his mind, his laughter began to change in tone. Naruto, Naruto, Iruka tried to halt Naruto's laughter. It wasn't working and the blonde had now started to cackle evilly. Naruto. Iruka nodded, satisfied. The demon head jutsu was his contribution to teaching and was highly effective at shutting up even the rowdiest class. The Hokage himself had asked if he would consider teaching it to the rest of the Chunin teachers. Iruka had refused, stating that someone may end up abusing the jutsu. Sarutobi had then begged Iruka to teach the jutsu to him, stating that it seemed to be a foolproof way of getting Naruto to behave. Iruka had agreed, on one condition. That was around about the time that Iruka first started to take Naruto to Ichiraku's. In an unrelated note, that was also the time when the third Hokage had started doing extra missions on the side, mostly D-ranked, as he needed to stay in the village. When asked the reasons why by his former teammates after coming in from catching Tora, whom he had developed an intense dislike for, he muttered something along the lines of need more money to throw into a bottomless pit. A month later, Iruka had put a limit on Naruto at 3, sometimes 4, bowls of ramen a visit and stated sorrowfully that he could no longer take Naruto out for ramen every day. Coincidentally, that was also the same time as when the third had stopped doing the extra missions. As Iruka's head once again inflated to ridiculous size, Naruto stopped laughing abruptly. Despite that, he couldn't seem to wipe that grin of his face. Shikamaru, raising his head from his desk to stare at Naruto, abruptly felt a shiver run down his spine. That smile seemed to be evil. Shikamaru knew that smile. It was a smile that his mother sometimes got on her face, normally when she was about to get him out of bed through various methods. He didn't know how and he didn't know when, but he did know that that smile meant that someone, somewhere, would be having problems. He just hoped it wasn't him. Troublesome. Verdict reached, he lay his head down on his desk and went back to sleep. Naruto, would you care to share with the class the reasons as to why you find this so funny? Naruto's smile widened as he slowly turned his head around and up to look Iruka directly in the eye. Warning bells, sirens and alarms went off in Iruka's head. Nothing much, Iruka-sensei, I'm just thinking about all the pranks that I could pull off once I get this technique down. Naruto began to chuckle softly and Iruka made a mental note to pass on a warning to the anbu. He also thought it wise to get a letter of amnesty from the Hokage. Naruto tuned out Iruka as he continued the lecture. What to do now that he had this knowledge? The first and most obvious use of the technique would be to use it to get to places where he wasn't allowed to go. The ANBU headquarters came to mind suddenly. His thought process was interrupted. Kid, you're not thinking big enough. Try and think a bit outside the box. You're good at that, right? What do you mean? Naruto was pulled back into his mindscape. He had the feeling that he would be spending a lot of time here in the future. Looking around, he finally spotted Shinigami sitting in a comfortable-looking sofa in front of a wide-screen TV. Shinigami gestured to the seat next to him. Take a load off. I'll get the movie started. Shrugging, the adaptable boy flopped onto the sofa and watched as placed a disc into the machine and grabbed a remote. All right. Skip, 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 ooza-booza arc. Skip, 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 second exam, prelims, final, invasion, fast forward. Ah. Here we are. Naruto watched as the fight between him and Gaara played out. Shinigami had fast-forwarded to a very specific point, where Naruto transformed Gamabunta into the nine-tailed fox. I am touched, kid. I never knew that you thought of me so highly. Actually, it's more along the lines of that I can never seem to get out of my mind. Kyuubi laughed. So sorry to disappoint, kid, but I don't swing that way. Naruto paused, processing what the demon had just said, before retching and dry heaving for a minute or two. Fortunately, he hadn't actually had anything to eat that day. He hated to think about what would happen to him if he threw up on the death god's furniture. Baka fox. That's not what I meant. As Kyuubi sniggered, loudly, Shinigami paused the movie. There. Do you see it? No. Shinigami slapped himself in the face. Why do I even bother? Look, kid, you were able to transform something else. So? Oh, for the love of, to the training dojo. Naruto strode behind the stiff-backed Shinigami, his legs slightly shaky. It appeared that he had upset the dude. Naruto gulped. He did not want to fight a pissed off Lord of the Dead. Once they reached the area, Shinigami concentrated and the floor of the dojo was suddenly littered with all manner of debris. A second later, and he had changed into his Hades persona. Throwing off his cloak to reveal his bulked-up figure, Shinigami drew his sword and got into a guard position. Now fight me. Weapons, taijutsu and henge only. Kyuubi, if you could start the match? Begin. Naruto immediately charged forward, streaking towards Shinigami. Shinigami leveled his sword at Naruto. Henge. The sword instantly became 20 feet long and Naruto was forced to leap into the air to avoid impalement, throwing kunai at his opponent as he did so. Henge. The sword became a metal umbrella, which acted as a shield against the kunai. Shinigami grabbed a single kunai out of the air in response. Henge. Naruto twisted in the air trying to avoid the incoming projectile, gasping slightly at the cut that the windmill shuriken dealt him. Yet he was still able to grab the shuriken and, completing his twist, threw it at a much greater speed, targeting the figure below, who had not moved from his spot. Shinigami placed his hand on one of the small boulders next to him. Henge. A wall of stone materialized in front of him, blocking the incoming weapon. Naruto landed on the ground, almost in range. He threw 4 shuriken to lead his way. Somehow lazily, yet still incredibly quickly, Shinigami moved his hand, touching each one in turn and whispering henge, with each touch. Flowers fell to the floor. Naruto was in range now and immediately threw a scything kick to the Shinigami's head. Henge. Only for the kick to hit nothing but air as the Shinigami became 2 feet shorter. Placing his hand on Naruto's shirt, he said again. Henge. Naruto stumbled, as his shirt became lead, the unexpected weight pulling him off balance. Henge, he cried, transforming it back into its previous form as he used the stumble to move into a sweep kick. Henge. Once again, the kick hit nothing as Shinigami transformed into a small black cat that dropped to floor from a height of 3 feet. Immediately, the cat streaked through the slight gap in between Naruto's legs. Naruto froze as he felt the point of a kunai pressed against the back of his head. Slowly, he turned around to see Shinigami smiling slightly at him. Henge, he said, and this time, it was a statement. With this technique, you can control the weight, the shape, the very form of the objects around you. You can use it to change your shape into something smaller, larger, something with claws, something with fangs, something with wings, something with gills. The possibilities are endless. This has the potential to be one of the few techniques where the only limit it has is that of the user. The only limit the true henge has is your own imagination. As he finished, there was a burst of smoke as every object returned to normal. Naruto had a lot to think about. He had just had his ass completely and totally handed to him. He had been fighting against a god, but still, that didn't mean that he had to just accept it. But it had shown him that there were so many things that could be done with the henge, so many things that Naruto could barely get his head around it. Of course, the technique could not do everything. Naruto, Shinigami and even Kyuubi had spent the past 2 hours and a bit trying to thrash out all the rules that came with the technique. Kyuubi was surprisingly, exceedingly knowledgeable about the entire thing. He said that many kitsune like to transform into a great deal of different forms in order to screw around with mortals. It made Naruto wonder if perhaps he had been given a special ability when the Kyuubi was sealed into him after all. It may have gone faster if it weren't for a couple of distractions. First of all, Naruto had been distracted about 10 minutes in. Why? Well, Hinata had woken up. Naruto had quickly undertaken to tell Hinata what had happened. Hinata had listened intently to every word he had said, simply enjoying the sound of his voice and the fact that he thought her worth the time it took to help her. Afterwards, she had even been able to answer the questions that Iruka-sensei had asked her. Naruto felt proud of his success as a teacher. The distraction that lasted the longest, however, was when Arlia showed up after tracking her husband down. It wasn't pretty. Flashback. A bright pink door abruptly appeared in the middle of Naruto's mindscape, with flowers and hearts adorned over its surface. Shinigami immediately paled, before throwing himself at the opening door, slamming it shut. He gestured a hand and the door became surrounded by chains that pulsed with a powerful black aura. Shinigami sighed in relief, before turning back around. All that was left of the blood in his face drained as he stared into the eyes of his wife. Hey Arlia! What are you doing here, my love? Arlia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath in, before opening them with a snap, revealing a pair of violent gold orbs. The Lord of the Underworld flinched at her glare. I think, dear, that you know why I am here. The death god whimpered pitifully. Arlia began to grow, in height, stature and overall scariness. This, my love, is a reckoning. Half an hour of gratuitous pain later, during which QB spent most of the time laughing his ass off, Shinigami managed to wheeze out a message through both his slightly crushed windpipe and the foam that had started to gather at the corners of his mouth. Although it was difficult to make out, Naruto could understand a few words regarding what he had said. "Sent boy back, time girl lives here, help him her." After that, Naruto couldn't hear what he said. Whatever it was though, it was effective, as Arlia stopped strangling him and patted him playfully on the cheek. "That's my husband, always trying to make me happy. I do love you, you know." But here she grabbed his cheek and pulled on it painfully. "If you ever take off to another dimension without telling me about it again, especially when I have plans, well, I'll just leave that to your imagination, shall I?" She knew that the death god had a much more sadistic imagination than she did. Getting off of him, she sighed dramatically. "Now, as much as I hate to do this, I am going to have to punish you." A wide smile materialized on Shinigami's face. "No, not that kind of punishment, pervert." Shinigami swallowed noticeably. At this point, Naruto interrupted. "Wait, didn't you just punish him?" Arlia looked over, noticing Naruto for the first time. "Oh. Hi there, sweetie. It's good to see you again. How's Hinata?" Naruto's grin seemed to be far too wide for his face. "Alive, thanks to you." Arlia waved her hand dismissively, denying the praise. "Don't thank me, young man, you were the one who gathered all the power to send yourself back through time. Caused quite a stir in the court of the gods doing it as well." Naruto he dismissed his feet, remarking airily. "Oh that was nothing." Arlia, Shinigami and Kyuubi snorted as one. Surprisingly, Arlia's was the loudest. Naruto grinned. "No, really. I had a clone on the way back to the village from Takigakure with a bottle of hero water. Only thing is that the clone had to go a bit slower so that it would be sure not to disperse. Unfortunately, my clone wouldn't have been able to make it in time, so I had to go without it. But if I had it, then put Sage Mode on top of that, I could have multiplied the amount of chakra I had by about 50 times. Complete silence greeted this statement. "Kid," Arlia said seriously, "you have no idea how lucky you really are, do you?" "No. Why?" "Sweetie, I was already arguing with my father to let you live and not cause your immediate death. He was thinking a freak lightning bolt. You know that great amounts of power cause a kind of pressure, don't you?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, that's why I can get stones and stuff to rise off the ground when I focus my chakra." Arlia nodded. "Naruto, if you had 50 times the amount of power that you were throwing around, then every kami in the court, myself and maybe my husband included, would make a deliberate act, in concert, using all our powers, to incinerate you on the spot, lest the mere pressure created by that power destroyed your world. Thereby releasing that power, to destroy that dimension. I'll say one thing though. That stunt you pulled has made you the center of attention of the court of the gods, for a short while at least. No mortal should have such power. It makes kami get scared." "Oh, that's right," Arlia said, changing the subject at the mention of her father. "We were talking about your punishment, weren't we?" "So that wasn't a punishment?" Naruto asked, getting back onto his original track. "Oh heavens no! That was just a little boisterous greeting after being unwillingly separated from my husband for so long." Shinigami started to sob quietly. Naruto shook his head. Despite being an all-powerful immortal being, he was so whipped. Honestly, there was no one who would ever be able to do that to him, Naruto thought, ignoring the slight sense of foreboding. Back out in the real world, Hinata wiped her nose daintily with a handkerchief. "Damn cold. I just can't stop sneezing." "Of course, I suppose that I could forgive you," Hope crossed Shinigami's features like a ray of sunshine. "Provided of course that certain terms of mine are met." Shinigami grimaced. Her terms were generally not something that he enjoyed fulfilling. You wouldn't your eyes if you ever saw the garden he had to build her in the underworld after some silly little argument they had several millennia ago. What was it even about? Oh yes, he had given that annoying little fuzz bucket Cerberus an extra pair of heads because it had not been doing its duty as a guard dog. She had been a bit upset about that, mind you. The hound became a much better watchdog. He had even been able to hire it out a couple of times to guard other important places and things. Like the time with that half-giant when he needed something fluffy to guard some sort of rock. Yes, that had been the week-long unlimited shopping spree in Paris, New York, a week long in each place. And that was just in one dimension. What sort of condition? He asked warily. Arlia smiled sunnily at him. It seems to me as if you people are going to be having a bit of fun around here and I want in. So if you let me tag along from time to time, then all is forgiven. Shinigami let out the breath of air he had been holding. That sounded easy enough. Unfortunately, there was one rather significant problem. I'm afraid I can't do that, dear. Shinigami backed away slowly as his wife advanced on him. Oh shit, she's growing again. He really hated this time of the month. Wait. I never said that it couldn't be done. I just said that I could not do it. Arlia shrunk back down to normal. Explain. You see, dear, the seal isn't actually mine. It technically belongs to the kid over there and therefore, I am unable to give you permission to actually stay here. Arlia brightened considerably. That's fine. I'll just ask Naruto then. So sweet, what do you say? Will you let me stay here every now and again so that I can be with my darling husband? Naruto was about to agree immediately, but after seeing the pleading expression on Shinigami's face, a sly thought came to him. Arlia, if you don't mind me asking, how bad are your punishments? Brutal, she said with a smile. Naruto nodded. And how often does Shinigami take the punishment if there is a way out? He did it once. Once. So I'd be doing him a big favor if I got him out of this situation then? Arlia crinkled her brow, trying to see where Naruto was going with this. Yees. So I think it fair to say that this would be worth at least a solid you owe me. The corners of Arlia's mouth turned upwards in a large grin. She loved her husband dearly, but she loved teasing him almost just as much. And it wasn't often that she was able to one-up him, and something that happened even less regularly was a mortal get one-up over him. Yes, Naruto. Yes, it would. Wouldn't you agree, my dear? Shinigami just sighed and waved to give them the go-ahead. Naruto smiled. Arlia, I would be happy to allow you to stay around when you wish to. Arlia smiled the sweet smile of an angel at Naruto. Shinigami, however, just sighed, his debt to the boy further increased. Now then, Arlia stated. What was it that you were talking about? Flashback end. Although it had taken them a while, the four of them had figured out most of the rules for the true hinge. Despite it being technically possible to transform another person, it turned out that this could only be done if one had that person's consent, otherwise their own chakra would prevent the transformation from taking place. Same as for pretty much everything else that had chakra running through it. Naruto could only transform objects that he was in contact with. When transforming an object, the transformation would only last for a certain amount of time, dependent upon how much chakra was used in the technique, unless he manually disrupted the technique. And then there was the amount of time it actually took to transform an object. Turns out that the better the chakra control, the quicker an object could be transformed. Although, by cutting the detail of the transformation and by practicing the same transformation over and over again, the time could be greatly decreased. Shinigami, it turned out, had absolutely perfect control over whatever it was that he used to power his techniques bastard. I heard that. Naruto cringed. Anyway, it would be a while before Naruto could change everything around him into anything in less than a split second. Even longer to do it with no hand seals and no smoke. But the worst thing in Naruto's mind, at least, was transforming into animals. Apparently, you needed to know the animal quite literally inside and out before you were able to transform into it, otherwise something may go in the wrong place and you'll end up dead. Turns out that at the moment the only animal he could safely transform into was a golden fox. A side effect of having the Lord of Foxes living in your gut. Which meant that Shinigami would be forcing him to do the one thing that he hated more than anything else, study. But that would come later. Right now, he had to wait for the rest of this school day till the bell rang. Naruto grinned, perfect timing. Naruto bolted out of the door as fast as he could, only to screech to a halt when Arlia commanded him to stop. He had already decided that it would be best for his health if he obeyed the majority of her suggestions with extreme prejudice. Taking her up on her advice, Naruto went up and asked Hinata a question. Hey Hinata-chan! He called, trying to stop her from walking off. Hinata just froze up, like a bird staring at a snake. Naruto frowned. He didn't like that analogy. Then he brightened considerably. No, like a rabbit staring at a fox. With his own foxy grin plastered onto his face, Naruto caught up with Hinata. Hey Hinata-chan, I was wondering, do you mind if I walk you home? Hinata went a bright red. Not like a date or anything, Naruto said hastily, afraid that she might get the wrong meaning. Inside his seal, Shinigami and Kyuubi face-palmed as one. Arlia just looked furious. Not noticing the slightly disappointed look on Hinata's face, Naruto continued. You see, I enjoyed talking to you in the class and was hoping that I could do it some more. Hinata went even redder and began to stutter out her acceptance. But much to her disappointment, she just couldn't get the words out of her mouth. Of course, I don't have to do it if you don't want me to. Naruto's voice trailed off dejectedly. Hinata's eyes widened. She couldn't let this chance just slip her by. Hi, she said loudly, well, loudly for her anyway. IWW would LLO, no, she couldn't say that word yet, like why your CC company NN and Naruto-kun. She looked up into his eyes, those bright blue eyes, and her heart clenched. Naruto brightened considerably. Believe it! All of a sudden, he was hauled back into his mindscape with brute force and found himself with his feet dangling above the ground, eye to flaming eye with the Shinigami, who had become his Death Reaper self, his skeletal hands fisted in Naruto's shirt. Let's get one thing straight, right here, right now. If you even think about starting with all that believe it bullshit, then screw the debt I owe you. I will bloody well end you myself, send you to the underworld in your fox form and let loose the hounds of hell. You'll spend most of your afterlife as dog crap. Do you fucking understand me? Sir, yes sir. Good. I am so glad that we understand one another. Arlia came up to him and laid a slender hand on his bony shoulder. He gets it, Gamikuin, now send him back to his girl. As you wish. So saying, Shinigami drew one arm back, still holding Naruto, and pitched him like a baseball. He suddenly found himself back in the real world. Startled, he looked around to find that Hinata was walking away from him. Puzzled, he moved off to go to her. And she's not my girl, he thought. Arlia just laughed at him. Hinata was walking away, her head down, and tears in her eyes. She had just realized something. This was not Naruto-kun, and thanks to the imposter's own lesson, she knew how it was possible, the Henji no Jutsu. Yet he had made a number of mistakes. The real Naruto-kun would have sat next to Sakura-san when he saw that there was a free seat next to her. The real Naruto-kun would have been wearing one of his orange jumpsuits. The real Naruto-kun wouldn't have explained the transformation technique so well after only hearing it once. The real Naruto had never called her Chan before. The real Naruto would never ask if he could walk home with her. And then there were his eyes. Hinata knew his eyes probably better than she knew her own. These eyes were similar, but different. They were the eyes of someone different, someone older. Naruto's eyes were always bright pools that she could lose herself in, but they danced. Those pools never stayed still, always moved, flowing, changing. They were always filled with untamed emotions, emotions that constantly shifted and changed. They could be sad, happy, mischievousness, joyful, lonely, angry, and all within the space of just a couple of seconds. This person's eyes were different. No longer an ever-shifting ocean. They had become harder, more set in their direction, now resembling a sapphire gem. These eyes held experience. They were the eyes of someone who had known loss and overcome it. She had eyes seen like these on Kurenai and Asuma. Eyes of a veteran, eyes of a warrior, eyes of someone who knew without a shadow of a doubt what their goals were and would do what was needed to be done to accomplish those goals. And finally, these eyes held something that her Naruto-kun almost never had. Knowledge. These were the eyes of a ninja. Hinata! Nay, Hinata-chan, what's the matter? He folded over at the waist as Hinata sent a juken strike straight into his stomach. Don't call me that, she hissed angrily, not stuttering once. Somehow, somebody had found out about her crush on Naruto-kun and was using that knowledge to play some sort of horrible trick on her. Now, normally, Hinata is a very quiet, shy girl who could take a lot of abuse from others without getting angry, just sad. This was different. Someone was using Naruto's face to get close to her, to make her feel as if someone did not think her to be worthless. No more than that. They were trying to make her think that he did not think she was worthless. They were trying to break her. And worse, they were using his face. This did not make Hinata feel sad, nor did it make her angry. It made her pissed as hell. Sorry, Hinata-san. I guess I should have asked you before I called you Chan. Hinata's eyes just narrowed at him. She turned on her heel and stalked away from him. Naruto grew sorrowful. Damn, I must have really messed up. Does this mean that you won't let me walk home with you? He asked, his voice slightly depressed. Hinata stopped once more. I would if you were really Naruto-kun. Naruto stopped, his mouth opening and closing rapidly. But I really am Naruto. Naruto's head snapped to the side as Hinata slapped him, her eyes filled with tears. Don't. Just don't. Why are you doing this to me? What did I do that was so cruel that I deserve this? Who are you? Naruto Uzumaki. Don't lie. Hinata almost shouted, tears starting to come from her eyes. I don't know who you are, but you aren't the same Naruto-kun that was here just yesterday. Naruto froze. How did she? What do you mean? Your eyes. They are not the same. You have the eyes of an older person. Those are not the same eyes as the Naruto-kun that I know. At this, Naruto's eyes widened. How on earth could she tell that something is different from him in just 3 hours by looking at his eyes? Shinigami whispered, hiding his words from his just smirked. In a couple of years, she would have been able to tell the difference in under half an hour. That boy is her inspiration. She's watched him for a long time. A very long time. Hinata, she probably knows Naruto better than he knows himself. After her explanation, she spoke to Naruto directly. Naruto, ask her what you can do to prove that you are who you say you are. Naruto grabbed Hinata's hand as she started to walk away. She just pulled it from his grasp. Hinata, what can I do to prove to you that I am who I saw I am? Hinata's eyes narrowed. So be it. She would play this game. Fine. What is the name of your fox wallet? Naruto blinked and slowly took out his anorexic amphibian wallet. It's a toad wallet, Hinata-san. His name is Gamachan and I found it outside my front door on my birthday. It had a note on it saying that it was from a friend. I was so happy when I found that note. It showed me that I wasn't completely alone in this world. Hinata blinked. She had been the one to give Naruto Gamachan to Naruto. She had no idea that it had actually meant so much to him, if it really was him. This was all so confusing. She could not refute the differences between this Naruto and the normal Naruto-kun. But surely only the normal Naruto-kun would know that entire story. She had never actually heard him tell the whole story to anyone before. Feeling more than a little bit nervous, she decided to use a method that would prove beyond a doubt that this person in front of her really was, or was not Naruto-kun. Slowly, she nodded her head. Naruto grinned foxily at her. Cool, does that mean that you believe that I am who I say I am? For some reason, he felt intensely relieved. That feeling of relief left him with no sign of it having ever been there at her next words. And no, not why yet. There is one more t-test that IW would like T to do. What's that? Naruto asked warily. Oh, out of every person that I've ever seen, only N Naruto-kun has red CH chakra running through his CH chakra C-coils. If I use my Bibyakugan, and C can see that CH chakra, then I'll can know that why you really are N Naruto-kun. Naruto froze. All of a sudden, he could feel the sweat trickling down the back of his spine. How do you know about the red chakra? Hinata merely tapped the side of her face next to her right eye. I've seen it, she said dryly. Naruto swore silently. Shinigami? Yes? Please tell me that the changes you made in my seal won't mean that Hinata will be unable to see any of Kyuubi's chakra in my system. Maybe? Maybe? Probably? Probably? Alright. The yokai is in quantities that are much smaller than they used to be and are quickly overwhelmed by your own chakra. She won't be able to see squat. Oh. I see, well shit. Come on you two. Don't be such drama queens. All that you need to do is ask Kyuubi over there to give you a little more chakra. Problem solved. Arlia broke in. Hey, you're right. Turning back to Hinata, he explained to her. Alright, fine. I'll show you my red chakra. Just give me a second to get it up and running. I've been trying to control that chakra, cause it really messes with my control, so it may take a while before you see anything. Hinata nodded slowly, before holding up 2 fingers in front of her face. Byakugan. She was confronted by Naruto's completely blue chakra system. It was ridiculously overdeveloped for someone his age and size, but it was blue, with not even a hint of red. Naruto put his hands together and concentrated. So Fox, you want to give me some chakra already? Although Naruto could not see it, he could hear the evil grin in Kyuubi's voice as he spoke a single word. No. Naruto nearly face vaulted and entered his mindscape to scream almost incoherently at the kitsune. What do you mean no? Kyuubi lazily picked his teeth with the tip of one of his tails. Think of this as revenge for what you did to me when you turned back the clock. You tore off the seal and then had the audacity to take my power, all of my power, for your own use. You did it for this girl. By withholding my power from you now, she will hate you and you will never be loved by her. A fitting punishment. Hearing this, Shinigami winced. Shouldn't have done that. Arlia's voice came to Naruto in a comforting tone as she placed her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Don't you worry about things, sweetie. I'll take care of this. Her eyes flashed back to a golden color. In fact, it'll be my pleasure. As she was finishing her last sentence, she began to walk towards Kyuubi's cage, growing as she did so. Shinigami sidled up to Naruto. You may want to leave now, kid. If she's about to do what I think she's planning on, then to witness it could mentally scar you for life. Naruto swallowed. What is it? One of the most terrible techniques known to mankind. You see, my wife is quite realistically one of the worst matchmakers in the cosmos, and she gets extremely pissed off at anyone that tries to ruin her fun. Shinigami gave Naruto a little push and he was suddenly outside again. Yet he could still hear what was going on. Give the boy some chakra. No. Strike 1. Give the boy some chakra. I will not let you ruin this for me. No. Get out of my cage. Strike 2. Now come on, Kyuubi. You really don't want what will happen to you if you reach 3 strikes. Fuck off, bitch. Strike 3. Naruto could easily hear the icy cold anger in her voice. Supreme women's art, kick in the balls and ojutsu. A high-pitched, keening yelp, bordering on the ultrasonic, suddenly split Naruto's skull, lasting a good 30 seconds. When it finished, Naruto heard what sounded like a sigh of contentment coming from Arlia. My unborn children, Kyuubi whimpered pitifully. That Kyuubi no Kitsune, Lord of the Demons, was stage 1. Now do you really want to see and experience stage 2? It involves an axe, Shinigami added helpfully. Chakra suddenly flooded Naruto's system. Hinata had watched unblinkingly as the person in front of concentrated. Nothing was happening. The chakra system remained as blue as his eyes. Hinata felt the small hope that she had allowed to grow in her chest wither and die. She had been right. This was not Naruto-kun. She had been right, but she still felt so disappointed. It had been like a dream come true when he had come and sat next to her, when he had called her Chan, and when he had held her hand. But that dream had been a false reality. Sighing, feeling slightly depressed, she began to turn off her bloodline limit, when a flicker caught her eye. Stopping, she stared closely at Naruto's stomach. Red flooded out in a swirl, invading his chakra system and running throughout his chakra system. Red chakra. Satisfied? Naruto asked, a foxy grin on his features. And Naruto-kun? Hinata's eyes widened as the telltale veins around them receded. She was going over the events that had passed in the last few minutes. Her, giving Naruto a juken strike straight in the solar plexus. Shouting at him. Slapping him. Wrenching her hand away from him. She had done all that in front of and even to Naruto-kun. As this last thought hit her, she did her own impression of a tomato, before falling back gracefully to the floor in a dead faint. Naruto let out the breath he had been holding, relieved. Apparently, she believed him. But now what? He couldn't just leave her here. Forcing a dramatic sigh, he leaned down and picked her up bridal style. He had not gone 2 steps before he froze, his body stiff as he felt Hinata snuggle up closer to him, a small sigh of contentment passing her lips. Feeling slightly suspicious, Naruto stared down at her face. No, she was still unconscious. Blushing slightly at the peaceful expression on her face, Naruto started walking towards where Kurenai usually picked Hinata up. You know, he said out loud, his voice quiet. I could probably get used to this. What if Naruto Legendary Anbu Council bashing, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.